It is the offseason, which means we are back at the Brewer Fanatic podcast with our minor league recap episodes. I am Spencer Michaelis, joined by Joseph Zarr. Like we did last year, we'll be going through a few different episodes. And if you tuned in last year, you know these are probably going to be pretty long episodes. But today we're going to be recapping the Arizona Complex League and the Dominican Summer League, as well as going through what's already happened this offseason in terms of minor league transactions, mostly players leaving the organization, or at least for now leaving the organization. There are a couple additions, one very recent addition as of the last couple of days. But before we get into any of that, Joseph, how you doing?
I'm doing well. It has been a classically long and eventful farm day, and I just want to forewarn listeners that I have a puppy in the background wrestling with my dog, and I have kittens that are climbing on my legs. So if you see a cat tail come in or you hear a bark, everything's fine. And I apologize ahead of time, but I'm solo farm dad right now, and so here we are.
That'll be just fine. We're just hoping the internet works well enough for this to keep going. So if it's a little choppy, I apologize for that on my end as well, because it's been a little iffy so far trying to get this going, but it's working right now, and hopefully it'll continue working enough for us to make our way through this. But
we got it. We're gonna do it.
Without further ado, I think we can. Yeah, I think we can. But without further ado, I think we can jump right into the most recent news that we have in terms of anything minor league related for the Brewers, and that is the recent Rule 5 draft. Not a ton of action in this one on the major league side. I believe only 13 players total were picked. The Brewers neither picked anybody, nor did they have anyone selected from their side of things on the major league side. But the minor league side was a very, very different story. They were kind of just, people just came coming for all of these Brewers prospects. They ended up losing 6 different players in the minor league portion of the Rule 5 drafts. So just to clarify how that part of it works, the Brewers are allowed to protect 37 players on their AAA roster who would be the same players that are eligible for the big league Rule 5 draft. In order to be protected from that, you have to be on the 40-man. You have to be on the AAA roster, and you don't have to remain there. You don't have to stay there. It's just an off-season paper move, basically, to protect players who are up for the Rule 5 eligibility. The Brewers only ended up protecting 27 of the 37, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit after we get into some of the players that they lost and why they might have done that and left 10 spots open when they could have protected, in theory, all of the players that got selected away from the organization. But let's talk about the 6 players that they did end up losing, and then we'll also jump into the one pick that they ended up making as well. So in terms of loss, Cincinnati ended up taking 2 players from the Brewers organization, one of them being, at this point, probably somebody that you'd have to refer to as a utility player, somebody who's played some outfield, some corner infield, was drafted as a catcher. Xavier Warren was drafted by the Reds. And then they also took left-handed pitcher Nate Peterson. So before we even get too far into this, we've got a question from Do Wizard over at Brewer Fanatic. He asked thoughts on not protecting Xavier Warren. Was he redundant? He adds he doesn't like the word, but he doesn't know how else to say it. With Luis Pena, Jesus Mate, Luke Adams, Wilkin, Fisher, Bovee, and Burke, all of these guys potential corner infielders, all way ahead of him at that spot. So I'll start by saying redundant, I think, is a fair word to say here. I don't think that's talking down on a player in any way. I think that's just a matter of, you look at the depth chart and there are a lot of people who are going to need time at first base and third base, which are Warren's most common positions. And then outfield, he was out there playing it, but it wasn't necessarily a spot that you would want Xavier Warren to be handling defensively. And I think this will come back to a lot of what we're going to get to in regards to all of these players. I think the Brewers see this as, it's going to be hard for you to find time. You gave us a very, very helpful, productive season in Double-A this year. let's give you the opportunity to find another team if another team wants you. If somebody would like to take you and give you a better opportunity and give you a chance to maybe play more often or play your more primary position more often, whether that's in AA or AAA, I think this is done. I don't want to say as a favor, but I think it is mostly as a favor to players like Xavier Warren, who have been really good organizational depth pieces who help the Brewers get through a long minor league season by doing pretty much whatever the Shuckers needed him to do last year and doing it in a productive way. I think it's a combination of, yes, they have way too many people at those spots. Not too many, but they have a lot of legitimate, true prospects who they're going to want to get playing time, and Warren is just going to struggle to find it. So they give him this opportunity to go find, or for another team to come and hand select them and put them in their minor league system and maybe get more opportunity. So that's kind of how I view it. And I would say the same for Peterson, for what it's worth, the left-handed pitcher that was also selected by the Reds. Like, that's, to me, I think that's at the point where it's like, yeah, we don't really view you as a future major leaguer. We like what you've given us. We appreciate what you've given us. We're not going to screw you over and leave you at the bottom of our depth chart. We'll give you the chance for somebody else to come and get you and maybe give you a better chance at potentially making the big leagues at some point. But that's, I think, what we're looking at for all of these guys, but especially Warren and Peterson. Joseph, is that kind of how you're viewing it as well?
Yeah. Yeah. Interestingly, when they took Warren, I was thinking back to an interview with manager Joe Aralt when he was back with the Timber Rattlers. And he had mentioned how Felix Valerio, name drop, had resurrected his swing in the offseason because Zavi had helped him cut up tape. And I have always seen Warren as kind of yes, he's a glorified depth piece for sure. I always see him as a guy who's going to be a future coach in some role. He's just a heady player, doesn't do anything particularly plus, right? But he's always available. He has a little bit of pop. He had a really good stretch with Biloxi, but then he kind of came back to earth as he does, and I think he ended up in the 230s. But when you've got guys like Fisher, Burke, Adams, you're going to have to move Pena and Mate around, Pratt, Eric Brown Jr. is still in the org. You know, they're going to find space for all these guys, and then you've got a Zamora up in AAA and Ethan Murray. It does become redundant, and that's the thing that's missed when fans first react to these, is that the Brewers do a great job of allowing these guys other opportunities. They've done it throughout their history. So I looked at it as a win for Zavi. My question for both of them is, are they going to be in Rocket City, or are they going to be in Louisville for Cincinnati? So we'll find out. Peterson, he had a good bounce back year. He kind of had a really rough 2024 in terms of the home run ball. I always like the profile of his heater. He's got a really good swooping breaking ball, but man, he really struggled in the AFL. And I think that when the Brewers saw that, we texted about this. When the Brewers saw that struggle, I think that was kind of the nail in the coffin for him in terms of possibly being protected. And he gave him a lot of innings, but I kind of see him as a little bit, he's like an Adam Seminaris in my mind, but with more velo and a better breaking ball, where Seminaris, kind of with the changeup, who had a great bounce back year in a new organization himself. So I think Peterson can do some good things, but when they both left, this just goes back to, they only protected 27. I think that was the least amount of players protected by any team, if I'm not mistaken. Most of them were in the 30s, low 30s.
I believe.
But yeah, I didn't think it was all that surprising. I kind of pivot, I'm like sad to see some of these inning eaters go. And both of them, they were widely available. And that's a big commodity through the stretch of a whole season. But I'm happy for the players. They get new opportunities. Oh, dog just got it in it. So yeah, I think both are they're gonna have a good opportunity here, and I think it'll be good to see what happens. I always track these guys in the next year or two seasons even more, so it'll be fun to watch in our alumni thread. Check out our alumni thread next year. I'm sure we'll have updates.
Oh yeah, yep. Minor League Forum on Brewer Fanatic. Check it out. We have obviously up-to-date stuff, but we also have a thread for all of the players who were once in the Brewers minor league organization and where they are and how they're doing. And it's very up-to-date. People are both
That's
Joseph
the
and
link reporters, man. Jim and Daniel as well. We love. We're tracking guys in ABO and the Nippon League. We just love the indie circuit's a little harder to get to because you can't really get updates, but we love doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving to a couple other pitchers who were selected. I'm going to touch on Hansel Rincon first. This one's kind of funny to an extent. He signed with the Brewers probably 2 weeks ago. This is a guy who was out of baseball for about a year and not really accounted for anywhere. Jim did a ton of research on him in the minor league transaction thread on Brewer Fanatic, and all that research ended up being for naught to some extent because he was selected in the minor league Rule 5 less than 2 weeks later. But yeah, this is one that's interesting too, because to me that means that other teams were probably interested in signing him.
Yeah,
the Brewers thought they could sneak him through after signing him, but at the same time, like I go back to they only protected 27, so they could have easily just thrown him on the AAA roster if they felt like he needed to be protected. My guess is, of all the names that got picked, and we'll go through a few more, that's the one they didn't really think they needed to worry about, if I were guessing, just based on it being such a recent signing and somebody they didn't even think they would. It would make very little sense to me to sign him and then not protect him if they thought he would have a shot getting signed or selected by somebody. So that one, I'm guessing they're probably not thrilled about, at the very least. But yeah, the other that was selected was Caden Vire, and this is one. If you're talking about losing talent from the system, this is probably the one that you get and you go, whoa, if everything somehow comes together, maybe that's going to be, and then very can he stay healthy? This is a guy who just has not be really to any extent so far in his career, and he's currently going to be missing most of, if not all of, the 2020 season. So has characteristics similar to like Cole Reagan's. Baseball America kind of put that out there at one point this offseason, showing how special that fastball is, and I think that's the main carrying point for him. But this is a guy who's been in pro baseball for years now, and he's thrown 21 innings. It's just a matter of he can't stay healthy, and I'm sure they were not done with Caden Vire, the person, but kind of willing to let someone else handle all of the injury issues and everything else right now, rather than just continue to keep. I think they know the talent's there enough for him to be a pro baseball player, so they didn't want to just outright cut him or let him go. And especially with an injury, you don't really want to do that. You want to help the player through it if you can. But now this gives it to another organization to do so. So Joseph, is that kind of Rincon? We don't really know much about, but in terms of Vire, is that kind of how you're looking at it as well?
Yeah, I remember I was doing the report when he got injured, and it was Tommy John, and I think he'll likely miss all the season. If anything, he'll probably maybe make it to some innings in the complex. Probably not, though. It was if I remember, it was the second half. Just total bummer. And it's not just the injuries with him; it's the control. And so that's a big lotto pick.
Yeah.
Big boom bust potential. That fastball, when it actually is in and around the zone, which is, it's kind of a 50-50 proposition, it's electric. It's got great run across the zone. And we were all wowed as we were watching the Mudcats. But then, as his career is done, he lost that control pretty quickly and had a lot of base runners and had some blow up innings, but then he, blew the arm out again. And so I think, kudos to them for taking the chance, and he gets another opportunity, but it's gonna be a long road back, and he already had question marks before the injury. So, and I think he's 22 now, if I'm not mistaken. So he's maybe come back when he's 23, maybe. Now I will say that's 21 times more innings than Cole Phillips, who we also learned is likely to sit out.
Yes, it is.
So. But yeah, fun player. It was great to be able to see
we'll get to Phillips. Yeah. No, I mean, if he stays healthy and he can be around the zone as at a decent clip, like there's absolutely a relief profile there for Vire at some point, but those are a couple really, really big ifs. The final ones that ended up getting picked, and one of these names will be very familiar to anybody who's followed the Brewers farm system, especially since the COVID days. Outfielder Hedbert Perez was selected by the Blue Jays. So that's a name that at one point,
later.
At one point, there were, pretty much. The Hedbert Perez experience was one of insane hype during COVID. He was with the big league, whatever they called it, the satellite camp or whatever they were calling it, with the players in Appleton during the big league season, the 60-game season. And he was the only player that wasn't even close to big league ready that they had there. And he did pretty well there. And a lot of guys were kind of like, yeah, that guy's pretty talented dude. And he got off to a great start in the complex league. But when he hit full season ball, things really became a struggle quick. And it was a lot of just swing and miss issues. Swing decisions, swing and miss, both of them a struggle for him for sure. You saw the talent. He'd hit balls 112, 113 miles per hour, and they'd go over the fence. And like you could see the power. It was evident. And in terms of true power, he's probably was one of the highest in the Brewer system still, even by the end of his time here. Like you'd have to look at him as pure power, one of the highest ceilings in the system. He improved the walk rate this year. He improved some of the strikeout rates. He showed some improvement in some areas that you'd like to see it, but it just wasn't quite coming together. And I would guess more than anything, this is like we've talked about with some of the others, but for a different reason. I think this is the Brewers giving him a chance to say, hey, we haven't been able to give you what you need. There's talent there still. Like, let's go see if another team can help figure you out. Kind of like Joe Gray did. That was either a year or maybe 2 Rule 5 drafts ago, where a guy with a lot of talent who the Brewers just hadn't quite mixed well with in terms of development. They gave him a chance. Gray, it didn't work out for Gray. Gray, I believe, got drafted by the Savannah Bananas this year. So he is on a very different path in his baseball world right now. But Hedbert has the power, and he made it to Double-A this year. So he's a guy that in the right system with Toronto, with some improvement in swing decision and swing and miss issues that he's shown this year, like I wouldn't be shocked if we saw him actually figure some things out. But I don't think that will be a Brewers issue. I wouldn't put that on the Brewers if it works out that way. I think this was just time for them to both kind of move on and him to get a new opportunity. I'll quickly tie in Garrett Spain because we have a question about this, and then I'll let you kind of talk about both of them here, Joseph. But Garrett Spain, who the Brewers drafted in the Rule 5 minor league portion last year, actually got selected by the Twins from the Brewers organization this year. And we got a question from Do Wizard on that situation. And he asked, what do you think happens with the outfield? And I assume he's kind of talking about the upper levels here as based on the rest of the question. An already thin group lost Hedbert Perez and Garrett Spain, and Luis Lara could end up in Nashville to start the year, and I would anticipate that being the case. So he says, I doubt an outfield consisting of Alastre, Garcia, and Nicasia would be successful in Double-A. So he's mostly asking about the Shuckers outfield next year. And these are 2 guys that were going to be most likely back in Biloxi, helping that team out and filling what is absolutely a need in terms of depth in the outfield, where it is lacking in the outfield at the upper levels. And the Brewers made a couple moves today, the day we're recording, to, I think, kind of help some of that, more in Nashville, but possibly a trickle-down effect to Biloxi because of it. But when you look at this, Joseph, just answering the question, but also if you want to touch on Hedbert and kind of where he's at right now, what do you think they're going to end up doing in Biloxi? And will they miss Spain and Hedbert in terms of trying to put a roster together, at least to start the year?
Yeah, I think, seeing the Jones signing today, who I mentioned in text with you as well, just a fun player. I was excited. He's electrically fast. He gave the Sounds fits out of leadoff when he was playing for Charlotte. It'd be fun to have that trouble for other pitching staffs. Spain was Again, he was another guy who was pretty much there the whole year. He got a cup of coffee up in Nashville early in the season where I was surprised, and he came back. He's got a lot of pop for a little guy, really good arm, decent range. He's another guy with a lot of swing and miss. Deceptively, the off-speed stuff gave him fits, especially breaking balls inside. He swung and missed it a lot. And so with Hedbert as well, holes in the swing. Like, we both love him. We kind of love the occult kind of thing around him as well. And he's got a good arm, but he's prone to lackadaisical moments in the outfield grass. And he's not a guy who, like, in a clutch moment is necessarily going to poke you a single. He's going to be swinging for the fence and, pop it out or strike out more than likely. And so I think both guys, and this is the thing with the minor league Rule 5, that you get a guy, and then if he's available, he's going to get plucked again in Spain's case because he gives good innings. However, I think they're going to add depth from outside the org. Personally, Nikazi is not ready. As much as we like the hype around that as well, he's got bigger holes in his swing. He had some rough moments in center field as well with Wisconsin this past year. And then as to the guy I think that's going to go, who I think is going to go out there personally is Adam Shefsky. I think they're going to aggressively promote him, and they're going to use him out in left field. And then Dylan O'Ray can easily pop back to center field. Who was getting reps out there and may even start at Wisconsin in the outfield is Giarte. He was playing a pretty good center field. I was very surprised by. But then I think they're going to bolster it with free agent signings. That to me is the most logical outcome there. And we just saw what the Rule 5 draft was over 2 days ago, and we've already seen 2 signings. One with an option, obviously, with the big league club, Major League. That's how I think they're going to bolster it, because the high A guys, they're just not ready for that push. It's already a OPS struggling league. The pitching is pretty advanced. It's not going to do those guys any favors to put them in the Southern League. Eesh, that's a tough proposition. And we'll have to see. And then, of course, Payne, does Braylon start? We'll get into that later, but does he start in high A? Things like that. So we'll have to see.
Yeah.
But I do think
I think you're right. First of all, I think Adam Shefsky is going to end up.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yep. No, you're good. I do think Adam Shefsky is going to start in left field in Biloxi to start the year. Maybe even, I think they want to try him in center a little bit too. But I also think Eric Brown Jr. is going to play some outfield for Biloxi next year and continue to get reps out there. So, so guys like that, I think they'll be able to fill in, like you said, a Vladimir Restituyo type of signing like they had last year to help fill some of those innings and those types of things. Like they'll bring in some guys to help fill the innings. And then, as the season progresses, guys are going to move up. There's a little more depth. Honestly, a name I didn't think of really, but I do wonder how quickly they might move Josiah Ragsdale, a guy who's probably going to be pretty comfortable pretty quickly in pro ball. And I think AA will be where he starts to get where he actually starts to get challenged a little bit. So he's another guy, Fisher, they might try some corner outfield with. They've talked about that a little bit already too. So they'll find ways to make it work. I don't think it'll be Alastre moving up there right away. And I agree. I don't think Nicasio is going to be somebody that's moving up there right away, but Eduardo Garcia will play some outfield in Biloxi. I'm sure of that.
That's one I was going to say.
Yeah. So like they'll find a way to make it work. I'm not super worried about it, but I do think they will add a couple or at least one option externally here, probably within the next few weeks. It'll probably happen before we're even done with this entire breakdown of the whole system. So we'll break it down if it does happen at that point. But the one selection the Brewers did make was Cole Phillips, a right-handed pitcher from the Mariners organization. Originally a second-round pick by the Braves, traded to the Mariners for Jared Kelenic as part of the Jared Kelenic trade a few years ago. Cole Phillips was drafted in 2022. He has not made a single formal pitch in professional baseball to this point. I don't know if he's pitched in instructs or any of those types of things, but he has not pitched in a true formal minor league game at any point. And now we know, or we've heard, he is almost certainly not going to be pitching in 2026 either. So this is a guy who obviously very talented arm, second round pick out of high school. So still relatively young, even though it's been a few years now. But at this point, you're talking about a guy who's going to be probably about, it's very similar to Caden Byer, but with no innings instead of 21. And we don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know, honestly, if we'll ever see him pitch in pro ball, but I think the Brewers are taking the shot on the talent and saying, if he does get healthy and we see what happens, it's worth us taking that shot for pretty much no risk. And I guess to some extent, I'm sure they viewed it as like, well, we lost Byer, who we were kind of looking at that way, and now we can kind of replace him with a guy who we're going to use similarly or view similarly to Byer. So it's a fun, talented arm, big velo. He's been up to 99 prior to all these injuries. Pretty decent secondaries, decent slider, decent changeup. Nothing crazy in either of them, but I think the slider was coming along pretty well pre-draft, and that was a big part of why he moved up. I don't think we will ever see much from Cole Phillips, but there is a ceiling there that makes it worthwhile to at least take the shot. So, Joseph, what are your thoughts on him? I know you were excited, and then I think probably a little bit more bummed out after you found out we won't be seeing him almost certainly in 2026.
Yeah, I was excited because as I said to you, man, the Jason Woodward, Cole Phillips Renaissance party. Love both those guys, and yeah, I was bummed that we're likely not going to see him. However, man, if you're gonna go for a guy with literally 0 innings, and minor league rule 5 him, try to get an arrangement and agreement in place and get him in the lab as he heals up, like that's a guy. I mean, that's a very high profile arm. And granted, will we ever see him actually pitch? I don't know, but that's a very worthwhile amount of money. You're not going out of your bonus pool at that point. You're not going with the major league rule 5, obviously, but you take a stab. Why not? So I sure hope it works out, because man, if it did, that is a lot of tools to work with from a clean slate perspective. So we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we are going to do a quick, much quicker than last year, rundown of a bunch of the players who have left the organization, or at least at this point are no longer in the organization. We're early enough in the offseason where some of these guys who've elected free agency may end up re-signing with the Brewers as the offseason progresses. But for now, these are guys who have elected free agency and have not agreed to return to this point. So we're going to jump into just going through a list of them, and then we'll kind of revisit a few of them that we both think are a little bit more noteworthy than some of the others. So starting on the position player side of things, Luis Urias is a bit of a funny one that I think people may have already forgotten he was in the organization at the end of the year again. We will see what happens with that, but he did obviously return to the Brewers organization for a short period of time. Oliver Dunn is a name Brewer fans will be very familiar with, whether you're a minor league guy or not. He ended up, after being DFA'd, he stayed in the Brewers organization, but at the end of the year elected minor league free agency. Jared Oliva is another one that we talked about. I think he had signed by the time we did these last year, and he had a really solid season. We'll revisit him in a few minutes. Jimmy Herron had a solid season, but not a ton there in terms of pure talent. Ernesto Martinez Jr. is a name I think a lot of people will be very familiar with. We'll come back to him as well. Reynel Delgado is a guy that we both were pretty interested in and had a really, really strong finish to the season. Drew Avens, Brewer fans probably remember his sac fly in his lone MLB. Really not, I think it was his only game with the Brewers this year, but it ended up being a game tying or game winning sac fly. So he showed up for a one moment in the big leagues, and Pat Murphy remembered it for the rest of the season. He was pumped about Drew Avens. He loved Drew Avens, but he ended up leaving, or for now has elected free agency. Nick Cale is another catcher that's been around for quite a while at this point. Had just been a little bit of just like that third catcher at the upper levels for both of them for the last few years. Adam Hall is a guy that they signed in 2024 during the middle of the season to kind of help out with some depth issues they were having. Victor Torres, another catcher. Vladimir Restituyo, I mentioned earlier, as somebody who helped the AA team quite a bit this year, playing kind of all over the field and doing some good things on the bases, good athlete. He elected free agency. Eric Haas, that one obviously everyone's very familiar with, ended up staying in the Brewers organization after being DFA'd following the Danny Jansen trade, but he is now a free agent again. On the pitching side of things, we have Julian Merriweather, former Cubs reliever. People may remember him in that role. He signed midseason last year and helped out in Nashville for a little bit. Alexander Corniel, a guy who made some jumps last year, and we're going to revisit him as somebody that is probably a little bit more noteworthy leaving the organization. Oh boy, Josh Mashaj. I always forget how to say his name.
I just say Mashevsky.
I always forget. Mashevsky. Okay, yes. Left-handed pitcher signed prior to last season, spent most of the time in AAA last year. Austin Roberts was acquired midseason, former Marlins pitcher. He spent most of his time in AA. Zach Peak was a minor league Rule 5 draft pick last year. Showed some good things. That's another one I'm going to at least circle back to in a minute here. Abdiel Mendoza spent most of his season in AA, did quite a few good things, showed some good stuff. Travis McGregor, also most of the time in AA, picked up early in the season. Raul Alcantara, same deal for him. Justin Yeager is a name most people probably know. He was the third piece of the William Contreras, Esteury Ruiz trade, along with Yoel Payamps coming to the Brewers. Did some good things, showed some decent stuff in AAA. We'll probably talk about him quick. Jefferson Figueroa, Jesus Lorenzo, Connor Thomas, the Brewers Rule 5 pick from last year, Eric Fetty, and Bruce Zimmerman. So some vets at the end there. Obviously, Fetty and Zimmerman both made appearances for the Brewers. Fetty a few more than Zimmerman, but both of them helped kind of finish out the season when they needed it. So played a big role in helping the Brewers kind of get through that final month of the regular season as they dealt with injuries and dealt with needing extra innings from guys to try and set up their rotation. So very helpful from them. But Joseph, I want to let you go through any of these names that you would like to revisit and kind of highlight as players that the Brewers might miss a little bit more than some of the others, and also just players you enjoyed watching the last year or however long.
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, Ernesto, just, kind of a legend in the minor league kind of prospect community with all of us. And it's, it's sad to see him go. And he had a real opportunity last year, and then he just had that really unfortunate, I believe it was a thumb injury. And after a really good start, he just never kind of reclaimed that. And this was like maybe his second or third free agent contract. He re-signed with the Brewers, and you just kind of saw the writing on the wall. And once they got Dalbec in the fold, and then he was losing reps when he was there. And yeah, you could just kind of see the writing was a little bit on the wall there. Unfortunately, always entertaining with the splits and just a gregarious personality, well-traveled, just an awesome human by all ostensible, points of view from interviews. So that's going to be a sad one. Oliva, really good player, super fast, extremely versatile in the outfield grass. Has a little pop in there. I thought he might re-up. I was a little sad. Delgado had an incredible end of the second half, as you know. He was phenomenal. I was really hoping we could re-sign him, frankly. And so maybe that chance is still there. That's for me on the position player side. That's all I'd really focus on. Corniel, I think that an organization, if he goes to an organization, I think they're going to try to look at getting his control a little more under wraps. He has enough to work with there. He's had really stellar moments, but his problem has always been runners on the base paths. And that also, after a phenomenal debut in AAA, that reared its head again. Zach Peak, I really liked what he was doing in Biloxi. Really great breaking ball. I really liked the resilience he showed last year. He struggled in the early bit at Wisconsin and then just came into his own and was pretty much lights out for most of the year. Mendoza graded as one of the best fastballs in all of minor league. I think it was his I can't remember if it was a four-seamer or sinker, but that really stood out to me for plus stuff. He was on the radar, and he was really good out of the bullpen. Struggled as a starter, but when he got in the bullpen, he was really good. So I was bummed there. And then Justin Yeager, man, he was even better in Nashville after being the closer in Biloxi, and he's been good in winter leagues before. And that's just the guy that you look at. You just see that is a guy who down the road is going to sneak into a major league bullpen, and he might have some moments. So he's got a little bit of that bulldog kind of mentality. He's well built, strong guy. He's just unafraid to throw his heater by you. He'll challenge you for sure. Yeah, and then of course, every year they're going to find veterans for Nashville like Lorenzo and Bruce Zimmerman. Man, he gave the Sounds an incredible amount of productive innings as a starter. And he kind of got thrown into the fire with Milwaukee. I felt really bad for him. But even though he had a rough first inning or so, he really buckled down and gave them, 5 full innings that day in the late season. And so he's going to get another opportunity. I wouldn't doubt if he gets a major league camp invite.
Yeah.
Figueroa on the pitching side, also, he reminds me of a guy like a Hedbert in the outfield, where he's been there in the org for a while, never really got past high A, had a struggling season, didn't really have a good season with Wisconsin, so it's definitely probably time for him to move on as well. But those would be where I'd focus.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you pretty much touched on everything I wanted to. I would say the one thing with Yeager is that, yes, the ERA was in a really good spot in AAA, but the walk rate went sky high, and was almost equal to the strikeout rate. And I think that may have been kind of the nail in the coffin in terms of the Brewers wanting to even consider protecting him. Because I think if the walks had been down in AAA, and I think the strikeouts had stayed about where they'd been in AA with the stuff that he has, I think they would have at least considered saying, all right, he might be worth giving a 40-man spot for now and seeing what happens, at least through the offseason. But I think seeing that walk rate so high really turned them off from considering that too strongly. But otherwise, yeah, I would agree with everything you said on that. Peak was a guy that I found really interesting after they picked him last year, and you saw the velo start to climb a bit as the season went on. I really like the breaking balls. That's the guy of all of them that, for me, if you can get him back in the organization, him and Corniel, those are the two that they're young enough and the stuff is good enough, and that I think they can be like multi-inning guys. Those are the two that I'd be most focused on. But for the most part, once these guys are out into the free agent world, you're probably not seeing them back in the organization. I think for most people, it's time to move on. Peak was only here 1 year, so I wonder if he might be a little bit more open to returning and seeing how a year or two in the Brewers organization would go for him. But yeah, otherwise, totally on the same page as you with all of those. We have a couple releases that we need to talk about quickly as well, mostly on the pitching side of things in the offseason here. So on the position player side, Gary Holguin had a really good start in the ACL this year, really overmatched in low A, and it was his third year in the complex league to begin the year, so it was kind of expected that, or second year, but he had taken 2 years in the DSL as well, so it was 2 years in the DSL, second year in the ACL, did well, but when he got to low A, just he looked overmatched. He really struggled to handle the better pitching, and he did okay. He held his own enough to stick for the majority of the season, but at the end of it, he was released. I can't remember if it was either just at the end of the season or just after the Mudcat season ended, but we're counting it as an off-season release for this purpose. On the pitching side of things, Alex Valicio, he had been somebody who had been pretty interesting a few years ago, dealt with a lot of injuries and just never really came back quite the same. Aaron Rund and Baden Root were both undrafted free agents. I believe that would have been after the 2023 draft. Both of them basically only out of the bullpen in the Brewers system. Both did some decent things as higher leverage guys, but also didn't really have the stuff to really continue in that type of role moving forward, and struggled a little bit more the more they climbed the system, each of them. Nick DiCarlo was a guy we saw very little of, unfortunately injured after signing out of an independent league didn't really get too much of a shot, but he's out for a while. And I think it was just they didn't see enough in the time that he was here to continue keeping him on the roster. Uh, Ever Orinya is an interesting one. This is a guy that I'd seen some video of when he first signed, and he was throwing like mid 90s as a teenager. As it turns out, that may have been helped a little bit by some substances, as he was suspended for performance enhancing drugs. We did not see him actually pitch much, if at all. I don't have it up in front of me. I'm not sure he ever pitched an inning in the Brewers organization, or an official inning at least. But interesting stuff, decent stuff. It sounds like, my guess is the suspension was up, because a suspension in the DSL is still the 81 games. And it's only, I mean, that spans almost 2 full seasons at that point in the DSL. So he missed quite a bit of time. And I think once it was over, they decided to let him go. And then the final one is, and I can't remember because it's been so long since he pitched, but is it Brandon Knarr or Brandon Knarr? He was a lefty who showed a decent amount up until AA a couple of years ago, but just dealt with an injury, and it seemed like it took him quite a while to be able to recover from that injury. And at this point, they found it was time to move on. But anybody from that group you'd like to touch on, Joseph?
Yeah, I think really out of all of them, I would just look at Knarr, because if you remember, he was at High Wisconsin with TJ Shook, our guy, TJ Shook, first selection. The legend continues. So, they both had, really good high A work, and then he got to AA first before TJ did, and he did all right. Like, you were like, okay, he met the challenge. Let's see what happens. And then he's just been injured for 2 years. And so that to me was a release due to injury, sadly, much like a Ken Hassler was originally. Our guy, Sam, oh man, our reliever out of Biloxi,
Gardner.
Oh man, Sam Gardner. Those injury to those promising arms, they just they happen, and it's really too bad. And I do believe Rund was signed in late December, I think, of 23. He was a free agent at that time, but I think he was wasn't he pitching for Campbell? Anyhow, I'm just searching in the archives of my mind. But Rund, you thought he had a really nice 2024, but his age was such that you knew if he didn't come and bring it in 2025, he was a likely release candidate. And the fact that he was struggling and he lost his late inning role, and then was struggling even in setup role, the writing kind of was just on the wall. So he kind of tailed off, and that it was too bad. But that, it's the atrophy of being a pitcher in the minor leagues. It's not easy. So none of those surprised me. And Holguin, his defense looked great at low A, but man, he could not hit anything. So it was what it was. Yeah.
He showed some pop in the ACL, but it just did not carry over to full season ball. We are going to, and I don't have any graphic for this, so if you're watching, we're just going to stick with what we've got on the screen right now. But we'll talk a little bit about some of the players that were just quickly run through them, and we got a couple questions on a couple of them. But all the players who were on the injured list, most of them were season long, or they were out for the rest of the season whenever they got injured. All these guys were activated at the end of the season, so we'll run through them. We'll stop for the questions we got for certain guys, and then if we want to hit on any of them quickly, because we're not going to touch on them at any other point during this series, we can do that. A few of them that might not be the case for, but some of them were out for the season, and we won't have anything to talk about at any level. So we'll start off with Quentin Lowe, two-way player, only two-way player currently in the Brewers organization, being activated from the full season list. And we got a question from Do Wizard on that. He asked, any word on Quentin Lowe? If he ever returns, can he stick as a two-way? So according to Kurt Hogue and an article he put out about a week and a half ago now, Quentin Lowe is on track to be ready for spring training, ready to go full bore. But I don't know if the plan is for him to continue to two-way. And before the injury, which he's now missed basically 2 full seasons with this injury, and it was Tommy John surgery. I would have said it was worthwhile to keep him two-waying. He showed really big power on the offensive side. He's a big, big dude. Quentin Lowe is a big guy with a lot of strength and a lot of power. But I always would have leaned towards pitching being his future. Now that he's coming off injury, organizational clock is really starting to tick on him, I would say. I think they're going to stick with just pitching. My guess is it'll be out of the bullpen at this point, completely full-time. But this is a guy who is tickling triple digits as a 19, 20-year-old. There's a big, big arm for Lowe. I think that's where they're going to stick with him. Joseph, is that kind of what you think too? Just kind of lean into the pitching now that he's back and kind of running out of years.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. But he's going to have an uphill battle as it is, right? Just like Caden Vire, just like Jesus Rivero, guys that had stuff, but he before the injury, he struggled with walks, locating consistently. But man, he can absolutely sling the white rat. That thing fires across plane. He's a big guy, as you said. So, but as we see with our guy Yearling, who I'm sure we'll talk about with the Timber Rattlers, when you have that stuff, you're going to get plenty of opportunities. You just are. He doesn't have the breaking stuff that Yearling has on his best days, but he's got a monster fastball with massive ride. So that's a guy that you can conceivably, as an organization, you can say, you can get by with one pitch. Come hit me fastball. It's that good. Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But man, I went from like unreasonable amount of hope into I just hope he stays healthy. That's it. And if it's not with the Brewers, that he can keep pitching wherever he goes, if that's what he wants to do.
Right. Yeah, I did not mind. He spins the breaking ball really well. I think it's pretty inconsistent, but I think at its best, I think it's actually a really good pitch. I just don't know how often we'll see it. And now coming off injury too, especially with an elbow, you never know. Breaking ball can be the last thing to return sometimes with that too. So we'll see how he goes. But if he's got the 2 pitches, triple digit fastball from a big body release with a big extension and a good slider, like that's also a guy who can move really quickly if the command is good enough. So we'll see where he's at. He'll be one of the most interesting guys for me to watch early in the season next year. Going on to a group of 4 here that we got a question, so I put them together. But Joey Broughton, Yorman Galindez, Josh Noth, and Jason Woodward all were activated from the 60 or full season injured lists. SF70 asked us, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on the Tommy Johns that missed last year's season rehabbing. So Noth, Woodward, Galindez, Broughton, are they all on track to be good to go entering spring training? Again, Kurt Hogue wrote about this. All of them are on track, should be good to go in spring, per Tom Flanagan. But I think the question that we should hit here is, with this being Jason Woodward's second Tommy John and him being Rule 5 eligible next offseason, do you see Milwaukee bullpenning or rotationing him? So do we move him to the bullpen full-time or bring him back and try and build him up as a starter again? This is a really good question, and I think we have a nice – Drew Rasmussen is the guy that I would look at right away with this because he was under similar circumstances. He had a little bit more time on his organizational clock left than Woodward did. I believe he had one more season than Woodward will. But they built him up slowly, and they kind of used him as a reliever, but for 1-2 innings at a time, and then he did end up moving into a starting role before going back to the pen in the big leagues. I think Woodward's stuff is some of the best I saw when he pitched, and it was a limited time. But not only was it good stuff, I don't know what the walk numbers were, but he was around the zone very consistently with a bunch of stuff that moved in all different directions. This is a guy that at his age, assuming the stuff is close to where it was, I'd put him pretty quickly in high A, and I could see it being the Logan Henderson style movement through the system that we saw in 2024, where it's high A. He's clearly too good at high A. He moves to double A. he's clearly too good at AA, and he moves to AAA, and he's actually on the edge of, like, yes, we should protect him, and he's maybe even an option in the bullpen for the big league team. Like that. That is what I think he's capable of. Now, we don't know how he'll look out of the injury, off of the injury, but that I think is how I would plan on doing it. The thing is, I think it's fair to wonder if the best way to do that is to just put him in the pen and have him work 1 to 2 innings at a time and let the stuff just play, let him move quick. And then maybe you build him back up later once you know what you have. And once you know that, like, okay, yeah, we're protecting this guy now. Maybe it's worthwhile to see if the starting can come back onto the table. I think that's how I would lean towards doing it. I don't know what the Brewers will do on this one, though, honestly. I think it's an extremely interesting question that I normally feel like I have a pretty good idea of how they'll lean on these things. I don't know. I'm not going to disagree with them either way. I think it'd be fair for them to attack it either way. But what do you think, Joseph?
My name is Joseph Zarr, and I approve of your message. He's Woodward. Oh man, I have a man crush on Jason Woodward. I think his stuff is absolutely electric. The first time I watched him pitch for Carolina, I double taked. I was just like, who is this guy? Because his stuff is violent. It's tight, swing and miss. His slider is good. Heater rips 95, touches 97. Oh, man. And it was in the zone. He knows how to pitch low in the zone, knows how to rub the edges. Like, oh, man. And he's built. Like, he's a little taller than Logan, but just as built, you know? I don't care how they use him when he comes back, but I want that path you just laid out where he's healthy and they're moving him quick. Because to me, he's a major league arm when he's healthy. It was undeniable when I saw it. Him pitching in low A, I was like, well, this is the wrong level. And then he got hurt. Oh, I was so heartbroken. And then, so, yeah, I really hope that this one holds and he gets those opportunities and he experiences health. Because if he's healthy, and I think the Rasmussen comparison's right on, because the stuff is that good. He's one of my favorite pitchers in the system, and I've only seen him pitch like 4 times. But you just know it when you see it. You just know it. When you see as much baseball as we do, especially in the minor leagues, you're like, okay, that guy's different. So, yeah, man, this is a big season for him. Fingers are crossed.
Yeah, absolutely. Running through some other names from here. NEL Cortez came off of the full season injured list. Jesus Flores off the 60-day. Eric Prado off the full season. Griffin Tobias off the 60-day. Tobias, that one's a little misleading. He actually didn't miss much time. He got hurt at the end of the season, but he was put on the 60-day because he wasn't going to come back during the season. Caleb Neiman, who is an undrafted free agent, he was activated off the full season list. I'm not sure if we will see him probably until, my guess would be 2027 on him. Josh Timmerman off the 60-day, Chandler Welch off the 60-day, Jack Hostetler off the full season. Hostetler is another one that you kind of expect to see somewhat early next year from what Kurt's article was saying, so that's good news. That's a guy who had Tommy John and got it early in the season, so you weren't sure what the timeline was. My guess would be that means it was the internal brace version, because that's usually a quicker turnaround, so I'm guessing that's what he got. A position player, a rare one in this list, Tyler Rodriguez, activated from the 60-day. That's a guy that I find interesting if he can add any power to his game. I think he has a good swing. I think he has a good approach, but I don't know that there's ever going to be enough juice in the bat for it to work, but I like him as a player. Delvin Beaudre is another guy that was a international signing a couple of years ago that got written up as like one of the more noteworthy pitchers in the system or in the signing class. Haven't seen a ton from him, but somebody that I'd really like to see once we do get him, and I'd imagine he'll end up being stateside. Luis Aguayo, he was a international signing this past offseason, had Tommy John shortly before the season. I think he'll probably miss part of the season, but we might see him in 2026. Dario Jaquez, we're going to get to him a little bit later in this episode. Jesus Molina, same with him. Thomas Pannone, Brewer fans might know him a little bit. They've seen him in the big leagues for a game with the Brewers, and he returned to the system last year. helped out in AAA for a bit of the season, then dealt with some injury. He is back, though, I believe, this year on another 1-year minor league deal. JB Bukowskis, same deal with him. He is another guy that we saw in the big leagues for a short stint. A guy I really like. I think Bukowskis helps the Brewers bullpen this year if he is healthy. He also re-signed on a 1-year deal, minor league deal. Nick Merkel off of the 60-day. Tyler Bryant off of the full season injury list. Chase Costello off the full season list. Costello is going to miss all of next year. Bryant was not in the article. I'm not sure what's happening with him. I really hope that he is going to end up pitching next year, but I don't have super high hopes for that one. Nick Merkel, another guy that's very interesting, very strong pitch mix, bunch of different pitches. I like Nick Merkel quite a bit, actually, but he is now getting into his upper 20s. So while relievers are always going to be a little bit different than every other position, his clock is definitely ticking a little bit. We'll have to see what he can do this year, assuming he is healthy enough to pitch. Another position player here, Ramon Rodriguez, a catcher that we both like quite a bit as somebody who just does a lot of really good things in the minor leagues. He ended up, was it an Achilles or an ACL for Rodriguez?
Achilles. Who's his Achilles?
Yeah, so there's a chance we won't see a ton of him this year. Yeah, especially as a catcher, that's a tough one to rehab from and come back too quick, but hopefully we see him at some point.
I think he is on the road to
Russell
return.
Smith.
I think he is. I think what I heard,
good.
I heard is that he's on pace to potentially appear by early to early middle part of the season, but you never know.
Okay. Yeah, that would be good. That would be a good news for the Brewers system. Russ Smith,
player.
former second-round pick, missed all of this season. Yes, yeah. Smith is somebody that we really haven't seen now for a year and a half. He was pretty good in Double-A a couple years ago. Showed better, improved stuff. He had a little better shape as well. So I think we'll see him at some point pretty early this year. It sounds like he should be good to go to start the year. Right-handed pitcher Will Rudy, former D2 pick by the Brewers a few years ago. Hadn't really ever shown the velocity increase that people thought he was going to see, and then missed all of this past season. Not exactly sure what his timeline is. David Garcia, another catcher in the system that does some good things as minor league depth. Cam Wagner is one that I think we're both very excited to see and see how he looks after basically missing 2 full seasons here. Somebody that I was hoping we would see last year, didn't really get any opportunity to. He ended up missing the full season. That's a guy who really had started to figure some things out a couple of years ago and then ended up getting hurt. And now we don't get to see if he can build on that, but he showed some really good things when he first entered the system and then hit a rough patch for a while. And then Daniel Corniel is the last one. Showed some interesting stuff in low A as a really young dude when he got there. So that's another name I'll be keeping an eye on. A lot of these names are these are really interesting arms. And for the most part, if they're staying in the system after dealing with big time injuries for a year, they're guys that org likes, and they're going to have pretty decent stuff. But there's very few names we just went through that I view as organizational fodder. These are guys who are legitimate. Okay, keep an eye on them because they have stuff. They have stuff and they have something to them that's they're worthwhile. They're worth keeping an eye on. So I would keep an eye out for all of those names. Any of them that you want to quickly touch on as we almost hit the hour mark before we even get through the in-season transactions.
No, I just agree with you 100% in the fact that every one of those guys brings something interesting, and they're absolutely all worth monitoring in the early going. How are they doing in their return? Are they being used as starters? Are they building them up? But every name you listed, I have enjoyed immensely. Cameron Wagner's second half, was it 2023 or 24, was phenomenal. And so, yeah, I've been wanting to see him. I was hoping to see him last year, but man, unfortunately, the health bug hit him. So, looking forward to them all.
Yeah. 100%. Moving quickly through the in-season losses, and these ones I'm literally just going to read through, and I already realized looking at the graphic that I doubled up on somebody. So we'll go through the releases. You can touch on any that you want to afterwards. I know there's one you'll probably want to touch on for sure. But on the release side of things, right-handed pitcher Jake Polancic, catcher Jorge Alfaro, Ryan Middendorf, right-handed pitcher Yon Gutierrez, shortstop Luis Velasquez, right-handed pitcher Saul Sanchez, right-handed pitcher Pedro Tovar, outfielder Lennon Mendez, right-handed pitcher Reese Walling, outfielder Yoswar Garcia, center fielder Bobby Dahlbeck, first base / pretty much everything for the Sounds at one point, right-handed pitcher Dikembe Sanchez, catcher Ty Duvall, right-handed pitcher Vinny Natoli, Sam McWilliams and Tyler Weisner, both right-handed pitchers. Eddie Rosario, that was more of an opt-out, actually, but he was technically released during the season. Right-handed pitchers Tanner Shears and Davy Garcia, as well as Frey Morello and Jefferson Tales, or Tales. Shortstop Johan Barrios, outfielder Anthony Gomez, right-handed pitchers Christopher Carrasco and Carlos Morera, as well as Jesus Rivero, who Joseph mentioned earlier. And then a couple of these are actually in spring training, but I'm including them here. Ryan Sandberg, not that one, right-handed pitcher. And then Sam Gardner, who Joseph touched on earlier, and Oliver Camilo. So of those names, I'm guessing you want to quickly touch on Dahlbeck at least.
Yeah. Man, I love me some Bobby Dahlbeck. Yeah, I mean, with Bobby, it was, he's kind of that consummate 4A guy who's never put it together at the major league level. But, man, he's just a fun player. Always seems to get a big home run when you need it. He's a better guy at first base than give him credit for. But, understandably so. When Vaughn got the mark there and he had the run he did, Bobby's going to search for an opportunity to play in the major leagues. He's at that point in his career, and he has the tools to get the chances. Will he ever make it happen there? Well, he does have that swing and miss penchant. So, he'll get it. He'll get an opportunity. He just does too many things well. He'll get an opportunity to get a starting role at AAA club, and he'll probably get called up again at some point and then DFA'd more than likely. But man, yeah, I love Dahlbeck. He's just a fun player. And Barrios, I was surprised when we let go of Barrios, but the guy in there is, also Tanner Shears, man. I was so heartbroken when he came back and just had like even worse control. Because he already struggled with that before. But man, that splitter, the splitter was so good when it was good. Yeah, I mean those would be the one, and then obviously Reese Walling we loved in the ACL, but man, he just could never really get it going in low A, even though he's a fun player. But man, big swing and miss, doesn't hit for average, doesn't really hit for contact either, doesn't walk. So there's a lot of those guys. So yeah, I would say out of all those, and then honestly, Dikembe.
Yeah,
he was one of the most disappointing seasons out of any prospect in the system for me, because coming out of 2024, man, he was electric and he played meaningful innings in the postseason for the Timber Rattlers. And I was like, okay, everything was down. His velo was down. His precision was off entirely. Walking guys. Oh man, it was a sob story in that kind of part of the prospects for the Brewers for me. That one was just sad, frankly. And then Tyler Weisner, man, for a guy who had that hype coming out of his draft year, touching 98, his velo was always jumping all over the map. You just never knew what you were getting. And when he got called back to Nashville, it seemed, honestly, and of course I can't verify this, it just seemed like he had lost interest. And so I don't know. Wish him all the best. And then Rivero, who I touched on earlier, man, he had some fun stuff, but he could never find it. It just never seemed to be there for longer than maybe half of an outing even. So it is what it is.
Yeah. I would agree. Dikembe is a guy that I was so high on coming into this season, and it's just, I mean, everything got worse, and I don't know what happened with that. I mean, this is a guy who was touching 96 with a cutter the year before, and it was all just low 90s, nowhere near where he wanted it. Like I assumed he was dealing with an injury, but clearly that didn't end up being the case, because I think they would have IL'd him and hoped that he would come back in the version they saw before. And something just happened, you never know what might have went wrong, but The walks were in a really good spot in 2024, like a big part of why I was so excited about them. And then they were awful in,
Yeah.
in 2025. So that part of it was tough to see. That was the one for me that I was very high on, and it just did not work out at all. On the trade side, I also realized I messed up this graphic, missing probably the one that people are most upset about. There were only really 3 trades involving minor league players for the Brewers this year. I think the big one here is Arianamo to the Tampa Bay Rays for Danny Jansen. They also traded Wes Clark to Houston for cash. And then the other one being that I don't have on the graphic if you're watching, Jorge Quintana to the Padres as part of the Brandon Lockridge, Nestor Cortez trade. So we actually got a question about that specific one from the Ginger on Twitter, who asked, is selling off Jorge Quintana something you could see us regretting? He says, I've seen more data / fantasy based prospect people having him very high. He said, I assume this would be the best place to ask this. And yes, I would say for sure this is the episode to cover him on. So for me, I think what people are excited about is that, one, he made good swing decisions while he was struggling in the DSL and then had a good finish to his season there. He brought some extra impact this year. So the power was definitely up. He showed it in numbers in the ACL, but also in some of the underlying metrics that a lot of these people are kind of pulling from to make the point that, oh, this might be an overlooked prospect right now with Quintana. And this is a guy who got more in signing bonus money than Mate and Pena did in this signing class. So, like, the Brewers saw and thought a lot of him. I would say this. I watched some of him in low A, and the guy is very talented. I think he's a guy who either sticks at short or plays a really good third. Defensively, he's got a good arm. I don't buy the bat. I just don't think the bat's going to be there, and I could be wrong. And the Padres, to be fair, are some of the best in baseball at developing young hitters. So, like, he might figure some things out in that organization that he wasn't going to figure out with the Brewers. I just don't know that the combination of hit or power is ever going to be there. I think he's just going to be fine at one of them, and I don't know that he'll have both of them. But he's a switch hitter who already has made a nice jump 1 year into his career. I don't love the swing just visually in general, and watching him, he was overmatched by some of the not even great stuff in low A, but just some of the better than complex league pitching stuff that he saw. But he's very young, and I would not be surprised if this is one that they look back on and say, that was probably not worth Brandon Lockridge to give him up. Do I think it's going to be a Fernando Tatis situation where they look at it and it's like we got him for James Shields? No, I don't think it's going to be that. But I could see it being something that the Brewers kind of look at and go, yeah, that probably wasn't the best use of that asset. Now, in the end, he was always going to be well behind the other infielders that we've talked about. And that was part of the reason they were willing to move him, I'm sure. I think the question will always be, did you get enough value for him? Not whether it was a bad idea to move him in general, but did you get the value that you would want for him? That's how I look at it. Joseph, I'll let you touch on Arianamo because I know you're going to want to talk about him a little bit. But in terms of Quintana, kind of how do you look at that trade and how do you think it's going to age?
Yeah, I mean, I think it, if you look at where the Brewers were at that point in the season, they had a lot of questions in their outfield with health. And, you had nagging injuries that were rearing their heads. You didn't know how long Frelick would be out. You had Churio struggling with his own injury. And I saw it as the cost of doing business in season at an area of need. And I didn't think twice about it. And I still don't think twice. I liked Quintana quite a bit. And I was really liking him in the ACL. But to your point, yeah, I saw several of those low A bats as well. And I was like, okay, there's no way he's catching a Mate or a Pena on the depth chart. And he didn't in the Brewers system. And so it's an opportunity for him. And those are the DSL winning Padres Gold. Like, they had a great season down there. So they know the young player. And it's a good opportunity for him. So I liked that cost basis, frankly, for what they needed. I did not like the cost basis for Danny Jansen, as you know. I love Arianamo. I love him still, and he's absolutely, he had decent AA output. The Brewers did well against him, probably because they knew him well. But man, he's had an incredible winter league. Oh, he's just a fun player. His defense is absolutely Gold Glove caliber wherever he plays. Not as much as Short because he doesn't have the range, but man, when he was in our system, he had the best ball to hand exchange and just savvy and made just plays look fun and exciting. Like he's a showman. And I can't verify this, but I will say I did hear some chirps from within the contact circle I have within the org that there may have been some kind of locker room dynamics there. And I don't know that for sure, but frankly, how I saw it is he knew how good he is. And then they left him in high A for that whole thing about swing decisions. And I was like, come on, that's part of his game is his aggression. And so to see him tear it up in the winter league like he's doing, I felt validated. I felt seen. And granted, so is Stuart Baroa. So who knows what the winter league tearing up really means. But yeah, he's just such a fun player. And, Danny Jansen also, again, you didn't know the finger injury. They wanted more from their backup catcher. So I understand the rationale and the need and filling that. And Danny Jansen is an accomplished major league catcher. I'm not going to dispute that. But, man, I think he had one moment with the Brewers with the home run, maybe. And, so I'm still a little heartbroken about that just because I loved watching Arenado play. And I saw a guy that, boy, if he could add some muscle and get a little bigger as he ages into his mid-20s, that's just, to me, that's at bare minimum a utility guy at the major league level. And, of course, the Brewers probably see that, and they're like, well, we can find those guys in quadruple A every offseason. So I get it. Just sad to lose the player. Happy he's experiencing success, though. He's just such a fun player. And, of course, Montgomery, as they do, just, took care of business against the Shuckers in the postseason. So is what it is. And Jader, as I said, he didn't really impact those from the off the bat. The Shuckers pitching staff, it kind of kept him in check. So,
yeah, I think for me, just seeing how a team that knows him was able to attack him is a big reason the Brewers had their concerns about the swing decisions going into the season. And yes, this is working right now, but I think they were trying to make sure he understood this is not going to continue to work all the way through the system. Yep. And at the same time, I also get that can be frustrating. And I heard similar to what you're saying with some of the less talent-based concerns with him, I would say, but I don't mind it. And it is funny. I know Jansen had a bad first couple weeks, and I think everyone freaked out. He had a 119 WRC plus in his time with the Brewers because he did have a very, very good finish to his season with the Brewers. And if Contreras had gone down and had ended up needing the finger to be, if he needed surgery in season, or if it got so bad that he couldn't play, I would have much rather had Jansen than a guy like Haas playing every day. So I'll never. Arenado's talented, and he is very fun to watch play, and he's an exciting player to watch. But yeah, for me, it was always a matter of I don't know that he's a big league player other than maybe a utility type. And if that's what it costs to get a guy honestly, he's probably Hernan Perez. If you get the best version of Arenado as he goes forward, and that would be great. That would be somebody that can help a team. And Hernan Perez started NLCS games for the Brewers in a series. They went 7 games
or helped
against the Dodgers.
9 teams in his career. Hernan played everywhere.
Right. Yes. Yes. So yeah, I mean, there's value to it for sure. I think it was definitely a worthwhile trade. I would view it similar to kind of how you talked about with the Padres trade with Lockridge. I think it was something that made a lot of sense for what they were worried about and what they needed at that time. And in the end, he didn't get many opportunities, but the overall production was actually quite good. So I have a hard time being too upset about it. But I do think Arenado is somebody that he's going to get some prospect love. People will probably see him on some Rays lists and wonder why they let him go. And I just think that's mainly what the reasoning is behind it. But quickly, we are going to – yes, exactly. Quickly, we will move to the 2 minor league signings. I've already talked about Ennis Leonard on the main pod. I'll let you talk about him quickly if you'd like to, Joseph, but Greg Jones Jr. signed today. You mentioned him earlier. This is a guy who his only major league hit is a home run off of JP Fireeisen, funny enough. But he's had a little bit of major league experience. He's shown a little bit of an uptick in power as he's gone through the system, a former early round pick in 2019. Made it to the big leagues very, very fast, dude. I would imagine he mostly played shortstop coming through the system. Now he's playing some outfield. I would imagine they liked how he graded out defensively and view him as somebody who can really help in the outfield defensively. And they love depth where they know that we can at least stick you in the outfield and you're going to make plays even if you don't hit. So, yeah, I think both of those two names I mentioned there are very worthwhile pickups that are going to help, if not just Nashville, maybe even in the big leagues a little bit this year as people that will provide some depth and maybe surprise some people too.
Yeah, 100%. I was one of the very first Blake Perkins guys because I have contacts with the Yankees, and I had mentioned, hey, this is a player on the rise. Edis Leonard, I know you guys touched on it, but man, I was super excited when we signed him. He's a guy that's just coming into his power. He's got a lot of tools. I feel like this is diamond in the rough. I really do. I think he's going to surprise some people. And when you lose these guys like a Jared Oliva, to a lesser extent, like an Eddie Alvarez, these really good vets that can come up and they can fill in some innings. And I love Greg Jones too, just because I watched him, because I watched the Sounds play Charlotte, and man, he caused problems. He got on base. He was instantly a problem. And from a pure entertainment perspective, I love that for the Sounds and watching the Sounds. Get a guy on base and the pitchers are already like double taken. They only have 2 throws. He's going to cause havoc. That's a good guy to have on a AAA roster. Maybe he finds another something. Maybe he can fill in at a pinch in the infield. This is what the Brewers do. This is what they excel at. And after that Rule 5, I was just already, looking forward to, okay, they're going to get some meaningful free agent ads that are going to bring a little juice. And they're going to be in the debate all season long, more than likely, as to whether they're going to fill an injury need. And, and both of those guys, frankly, could do that. I look at Greg Jones as a little more dynamic version of Johnny Davis. You remember Jonathan Davis, center field, covers even more ground. The guy hits the alleys like, it's like a gazelle. It's very fun to watch. So, I'm excited about both pickups quite a bit.
Yeah, I agree. I think we'll probably see a few more names that are pretty interesting pop up as this offseason progresses, but I think these are 2 really interesting ones to kind of kick off the minor league signings throughout the offseason. So quickly, we are going to do just a full minor league organizational overview, but we are going to dive much deeper into them for each team as we continue through. We'll do that at the full season levels. For now, we're just going to touch on all of them quickly, and then we'll talk a little bit about the ACL and the DSL seasons for both of the blue and gold teams. But on your screen, if you're watching, you can see all of the organizational records. DSL blue went 29 and 25. Gold went 27 and 29. The ACL Brewers went 30 and 30. The Carolina Mudcats in their final season as the Mudcats went 68 and 60. The Timber Rattlers, the lone outlier in terms of a negative record here, they went 56 and 74. The Shuckers went 74 and 64. They were the only team to play in the playoffs. They were swept 2-0 by Montgomery. And the Sounds went 85 and 63. The overall record for the organization was a very, very strong 369 and 345. And that's including a T-Rats team that was almost 20 games under 500. So obviously, successful season overall for the system. Not quite the upper level success that you'd hope to have, maybe a few more playoff appearances. But overall, I would say a lot of competitive baseball this year, and having watched a lot of games, and obviously you watch a ton of games, Joseph, for the most part, you were turning on a game and you were entertained by what was happening on the field that night. I think there was a lot of stuff to watch for pretty much every level, a little bit different than most seasons where even though the T-Rats record wasn't good, like at almost every point, there was a pretty fun name or 2 to be watching if you turned on a game. So like, including Aaron Amo early in the season, But Blake Burke was there, and then obviously later in the season you had Mate and Pena and Adam Shevsky, and then it got really exciting. But pretty much all season there was stuff to watch, and it was on the pitching side at times too. But just overall, I think, like I said, we'll dive into the full season levels at each episode as we get there. But looking at the DSL teams and the ACL team, obviously not watching them and not having as good of an idea of the day to day, but you wrote the link reports for a lot of them, and you were following along probably much closer than the average minor league fan would be. How did you kind of see the seasons playing out for these teams, and anything you specifically want to point out before we kind of jump into our player tiers for both levels?
Yeah, absolutely. Rapid fire them all. DSL squads we'll get into, so I'm not going to touch on them here, but I would just say straight to the ACL. They started electric. And that's important because if you remember, the Mudcats' first month was possibly the most exciting month of prospect baseball, Brewers-wise, that we've had maybe ever. They were getting publicity everywhere. And then our guy, Adam Shevsky, got hurt. And it kind of and then Dingus got promoted. Losing that bat was immense. And so the Mudcats had opportunities in the first half and the second half to get into the postseason. They just, in the second half, they lost the bullpen. In the first half, it was an atrophy of injuries and promotions. And that just is what it is. And they really just could not get over the hump. The T-Rats, man, mid-season, coming out of the first half, before Dingus hurt his hammy, that was a team on the rise, despite what happened overall. And then it just all fell apart. They played at the Whitecaps. You remember that? They were playing that juggernaut Whitecaps team, neck and neck that series. They won the first game. They ended up losing, I think, 5-1. However, Dingus got hurt in that series after he had a monster game. I believe it was in this series. But yeah, so I look at that season with an asterisk, like injuries. The bullpen was just a quagmire. It is what it is. Biloxi, another team that just overcame a terrible start and just absolutely had a phenomenal season by every measure. I just think that that was an encouraging season. They lost in the postseason. They also had some injuries in the pitching staff then. So, the minor league season's so long and there's so many things at play. It's so hard to actually do something in the postseason. Nashville, to me, one of the most pleasing seasons overall. They just continued to surprise. They had guys coming and leaving, going to the big club. They're signing Dahlbeck. They're getting Vaughn, to finish 22 over. Just an incredible job by the coaching staff, like truly. And there was no way in the second half. I was joking throughout that, they're going to catch Scranton Wilkes-Barre. They're only 11.5 back with 20 to go. I mean, man, they had an absurd second half, including just the thing for the Sounds that actually just absolutely wrecked it was how they came out of the start of the second half. They had a run there where they lost, like, I want to say 7 to 10 in a row. Maybe that's a little too many, but just a rough stretch, including coming out of the gates, playing Scranton Wilkes-Barre. They were a juggernaut. So yeah, but they were very encouraging overall, entertaining. I loved watching the Sounds. They're such a fun watch. Jeff Hamm does such a great job in the booth too. But yeah, that's just quick rapid fire.
Yeah. All right, let's jump into what is probably going to be even longer than the other stuff we've already been doing. So let's get moving on to our DSL into our DSL tiers here. So we got a bunch of questions. We will kind of hit on them as we get through certain players. And this is just a rough kind of outline of kind of how we look at the overall body of work from the DSL this year and the players that we were, you get some data, you get some video, but for the most part, you're relying on what you see in the stats and what you see from maybe some slight reports that you might get from people. Or I think both of us have a few people that we know who might give us some tidbits on what's happening, but like for the most part, we don't really know here. So this is more of a crapshoot than I think the rest of the levels, once we get through into full season ball, will be in terms of how we tier these. But I think the main thing we both agreed upon is that no, there's no Jesus Mate, there's no Luis Pena in this class. Frankly, there's not even like a Jorge Quintana that you can look at and go, yeah, there's absolutely a lot of major league tools here. But there are a lot of interesting players who, some are repeat guys, some are guys who made their debut. but a lot of guys who showed things that like you can see how they could build upon it and make themselves into more serious prospects that people are going to know the name of, and potentially once they come stateside, they know a little bit more about them. And for me, this is my opinion. I put Alexander Frias at the very top because while he missed a decent amount of time this year, what we did see from him, it was quite interesting, and the overall production was good, but also what I was able to see on some video and what I was able to find out in terms of some of the data, like this is a guy who, if he had played a full season, we might have been looking at him as one of those, maybe at least Jorge Quintana level guys. I'm gonna pull up the stats here for him, but for Frias, like it was a small sample, 112 plate appearances, but he had a 123 WRC plus. He only had one homer, but I also saw batted balls on video of 108 and 109 and 107. This is a guy who will not turn 18 until March of next year. He was 17 all year. He will be barely 18 when next season starts, and he'll spend the entire season as an 18-year-old, obviously. Along with what we saw on the offensive side of things, which is a guy who can hit the ball hard. He limited strikeouts at a really nice rate. He walked at a reasonable rate, showed some speed as a pretty big guy for his age at 6'2", 177. I would guess he even weighs a little bit more than that. That's his signing weight on the site right now. But he also has a cannon of an arm. We're talking like a 70 grade arm right now as a 17-year-old, a guy who could probably throw in the mid 90s, if not a little higher on the mound. And there's even been talk of like, if it never works out hitting wise, like they'll probably move him to the mound before they give up on him because the arm is electric. His brother has been a big league pitcher before. He's also still in the minor leagues doing some good things. This is a really fun one for me. Just tooled up guy who showed ability to do a lot of good things offensively. If there were to be a surprise full season ball, like very early in the season type of guy next year, this is the one I would keep an eye on as somebody that, like, Carolina is lacking outfielders in general. This is a guy who's shown so much. Like if he moved maybe at the O'Ferry or not the O'Ferry, the Luis Lara pace of being, maybe May, or even the Churio pace of being maybe in May, you see him instead of starting the year with Carolina. Like I would not be shocked by that. Do you have thoughts on Frias before we kind of move to our next group here?
Yeah, I have your thoughts. I saw right field clips. Whew.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about a laser. Yeah, and man, he was a guy that I was really hoping qualified for some of the Baseball America data after the season. I don't think he did. I think that's like you need 150, if I recall, when I talked to them. Because I actually asked them. I was like, hey, yeah, he, because the headliners in the outfield obviously were Antunes and Fenelon, and Frias just blew him out of the water in terms of full package. Not to speak down on the other two, but yeah, it was one of the more pleasantly surprising, exciting debuts. And so, yeah, I think he starts in Arizona, and I think that he's going to be starting every day down there early. And I think that, yeah, we could see, if not in that early window, definitely by summer. That's just the way I see it. Could be wrong. They might give him a whole season there. You never know. They didn't bring up Handelfry till late. So yeah, we'll just have to see.
Yeah. You mentioned Antunes and Kenny Fenelon. Those were the two highest bonus guys in the draft, or actually two of the three highest bonuses in this class. Both showed some interesting stuff, and they're both in the same tier right now. I think if we had seen Frias all year, he might have been a step above them. But in terms of the tools, and we got some questions on Fenelon and also on just the general top three. And we'll get to that once we kind of hit on the third one, because he's not quite in this tier for us. But both Fenelon and Antunes showed some good things, especially from what I heard on Antunes. The production didn't quite meet didn't match up with what people were seeing down there and what scouts were thinking of him. I think he's the one that, for me, like when I look at it, looking forward, I think I'm going to view him still as a higher tier than I would probably view Kenny Fenelon. But Fenelon did show some very real pop, and he hit a home run in his first game in the DSL. He obviously ended up with 5 homers in the DSL, which there's not usually a ton of home run power down there. We got a question kind of asking in general about him from Alan, and he asked anything to update the development of Kenny Fenelon, such as ceiling, strengths, weaknesses. Thanks. So for me, the ceiling's still very, very high. This is a guy with big raw power, with big speed, reportedly a very good center fielder. But the swing and miss is, and the strikeouts actually aren't as bad as you would maybe have guessed, but the whiff rate isn't public, but it's pretty high. It gives me a lot of, we talked about him, the Hedbert Perez type of vibes with the profile. And I think a little different with a little more speed and a little bit more defense probably built into the profile, but it's very power based on offense. And I think as he climbs levels, you're going to see that exposed even more. And he had a below average season production wise overall, even now in the DSL. So I have some concerns with that. Now, I would still say, and I think Baseball America might have made this comp when he was signed, but like there are Mike Cameron type of capabilities here with the glove and some speed and some power. And if he can put it together, that's what you're hoping for. It's a long ways away. We don't know how it's going to work out, but I think swing and miss and swing decision stuff is always going to concern me the most with young players. And the fact that he's already got it in the DSL, that does worry me a little bit. So that's what I want to see improve next year. I want to see if he takes steps in that direction faster than Hedbert did, then maybe he starts looking a little bit more like somebody you really got to pay attention to for me. But right now, that is a pretty big concern for me.
Yeah. The center field piece is nice. I was going to say as well that there's a little bit of the Jose Anderson kind of feel to it as well, who we'll get to in Carolina, but also showed quite a bit of swing and miss, even though he showed strides. But yeah, that's the trick with that profile there. As we saw with Eduardo Fernandez, who never played center field, was a right fielder. But if you can't fix those holes in your swing, it's not going to get easier as you move up. It just isn't. So it'll be very interesting to see if they DSL him again, give him more reps every day, try to work on that there in the academy, or if they'll rapid fire him, because, they've had high profile prospects before that they've kept over in the DSL. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything at this point. I expect him to stay, honestly, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I think Frias comes stateside. I think Antonez does go stateside despite having worse production, just based on what I've heard about him. And yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, it just depends on what the ACL roster is going to look like, because you don't have 2 ACL teams like you did in the DSL. So outfield spots are going to be a little bit more limited. But my guess is still that they're going to end up pushing him. It just might not be the cleanest fit. I think with a DH and stuff, they'll be able to make it work. But if any of them get held back, he's my guess of the 3. But the other one we'll get to in a minute on the other side of on the infield side of things. He's one that I think is going to end up staying in the DSL for another year. But quickly, let's get through a couple of these returners. The last 4 we have in this top tier are actually 4 returners to the DSL in their second season. Jonathan Rangel. This is a guy who mostly played corner infield the year before, but actually got catcher reps this year, and really, really worked at that. If I followed him on Instagram and saw him, he was posting stuff all the time. He was working real hard on the catcher side of things. Infielder Juan Martinez, also a returner who had a really solid season. Moises Polanco, another infielder, had a really solid second season. And Frandy LaFond, who has finished both his seasons really well in the DSL, but hasn't quite put a full season together either of the seasons that he's been down there. We got questions on all of these guys. So I'll start with LaFond from Sprawl135 on Twitter. What do you think of him? He had a nice 2024 in the DSL. Brewers had him repeat. Got off to a brutal start this year. It was a 51 WRC plus in June, but he finished better. It was 136 after that. Was he a 2024 flash in the pan, or do you expect him to start in the ACL next year? So I do expect him to be in the ACL next year, and that's another outfielder that they're going to have to figure out. The strong finishes both years are very good to see. Over the course of a longer season, you have a little bit more leeway to get away with those, and you don't in the short season. They will mess with your full season numbers, obviously, quite a bit more than in a bigger sample, but there's good stuff here. I like his swing from the video I've seen. He packs some punch for what is more of like a stocky type of build from what I've seen. And yeah, he's a guy that I think he'll be in the ACL. I'm not expecting big things from him, but he showed some flashes. He showed some good tools. If he did start to figure some stuff out for a full season, it might start to get more interesting. But yeah, that's kind of how I'm viewing him moving into 2026. Is that how you look at it?
Yeah. To this point, he's kind of a little bit of eye candy tease in a way. Like, I really like him.
Yeah.
He has yet to really put together any stretch of any type of prolonged meaning. He's ending his seasons well. Like he ended his season well in 2024 as well. So I don't know if there's something here. And we have to also remember, these are very small, short seasons. They don't play a ton of games. And he seems to be a fluid athlete. That always sticks out to me. However, it'll just be interesting. Will they keep him a third year? I don't know. You look at the outfield depth right now in the ACL, it's kind of like you look at it, you're like, well, there's no one there really that's going to prevent anybody from getting an opportunity. It's not. So I think it's still wide open. He is a guy, like, to your point, I could see coming over just to get an opportunity there. And I think, if anything, last year showed us that oftentimes, like, the pitchers in Carolina who came up from the complex, they all almost to a man did better in low A than they did in the complex. So, sometimes there's anomalous things like that. And so that could be the case here. When I see him move, I see a pro athlete for sure. He's very fluid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We got asked about Juan Martinez and Moises Polanco by Daniel. We'll also touch on Angel Gonzalez here. He was in our others of note section as well. But Martinez, this is a guy who he plays some middle infield, signed for only $125,000, switch hitter. And the big thing for me this year is that he really increased the power output. This is a guy who really didn't show much sign of power anyway. He had a solid debut season in the DSL. It was a solid season. But he went all the way up to this season. It was a 157 WRC plus. He had 13 that first season, really whatsoever. And he also stole 24 of 25 bases while walking more than he struck out. He only struck out at 11% clip. Martinez is super interesting to me, and he's a bit younger for a repeat guy. He won't be 19 until mid-April, so he'll be when he's going to move stateside. I'm quite confident in that. As a middle infielder, switch hitter, but he'll only be 19 as the season starts, and I mean that's a really, really normal age to be in the ACL. He seems like one of those guys that, as the season progresses, if he hits in the ACL, could move to low A, and reports on his glove have been pretty solid. He's a fun one. This is one that I like a lot as a repeat guy. And Polanco is actually pretty similar, where he showed a little bit more power than he had shown before. Also a guy who can handle shortstop probably a little bit more than Martinez can, from what I've heard. To me, they're both similar in that if the power is there a little bit more consistently, they do a lot of really good things on the baseball field from what I've heard. If you can impact the ball enough, it's like I talked about with Tyler Rodriguez when I mentioned him earlier. Like, if you can impact the ball enough to make it work, yeah, there's plenty to like with both of these guys. And to quickly touch on Gonzalez too, I this is more just stuff I've heard a little bit more about him. The production might be a little bit higher than the talent for him, unlike what we've talked about with some of the other guys, where he did a good job in a repeat season in the DSL. But this one, the other two kind of had a lot of good things going for them the first season, but maybe added to that. Gonzalez struggled a decent amount that first year and then had a really nice second season. But that gives me like the vibes of Holguin that we talked about earlier, where it's like, yeah, you figured it out because you face the same type of pitching, and then it's going to take you another year to do it at the next level. And then it's just too slow paced movement wise. I think the other guys just added on to an already solid frame that they had built their first season. So for me, those two are in a different tier than Gonzalez, but I really like Martinez and Polanco. I think those are two really fun repeat guys that are both, I think, ACL bound next year.
Yeah, and going back to the Quintana trade, the Brewers know they have these two in the pipeline. Martinez in particular, I mean, he obviously has speed, 7 triples, I think 24, 25 stolen base. He's also, like, if you look at his fielding percentages, now, granted, they're playing on DSL diamonds, but he's looking like 99% at like 190 second base innings, only 5 errors across 400 plus. Like between third base where he had 94%, that is a guy that is already playing at a high level in the infield. Polanco as well can fill in at short. Martinez doesn't play short really. And so, yeah, both those guys, I'm absurdly excited to try to get a glimpse of them stateside, just because, man, Martinez's season too, like he almost hit 1,000 OPS. I mean, that's not to be trifled with. That's impressive. So, and if you remember, in 2024, we had several of us on the board. I think it was Cheesehead and QC as well initially, who was pulling out certain ISO metrics, and Martinez at midseason was fitting all sorts of intriguing categories, and then he kind of just tailed off a little bit at the end of his season, and then to see him come back in 2025 and put that in the wake with an incredible year is really exciting. He's one of the guys that I actually had written in my notes from my DSL coverage, be excited about Martinez. And I could say the same about Polanco. So, yeah, completely echo your sentiments there.
Yeah. And then I will save the Jonathan Rangel talk for a few minutes from now when we get to the other catchers that are going to be talked about here, because it's an interesting group of catchers. I think we both definitely agreed on that in the DSL this year. There's quite a bit to like about really the whole group, which is kind of rare. But moving to that intriguing debut type of tier here, Carlos Done, and he has an asterisk next to him on the graphic because it was his debut season, but he was signed in the 24 class and then missed all of 2024 with the injury. So it's technically his second season, but he showed some really good things. Had a 107 WRC plus, but had a really nice stretch at one point, hitting multiple homers in a short span. He showed his speed off. Well-built guy on the video that I've seen, and I like his swing from the right side. If he had done this in his second season, it probably would have gone in the others of note category, but because he missed a full season, and yes, he's a little bit older than most of the other guys making their debuts in the DSL, but like he showed a lot of interesting stuff in his profile. So for me, he was worthwhile keeping in the intriguing debut category as somebody that, again, another outfielder that they're going to have to consider moving stateside, especially as he's hit 19 years old and showed some good things, but I don't know exactly which way they're going to go with that. Now we'll go to Christopher Acosta. This is one. Acosta's a guy that when I saw a video of him post signing, I didn't quite see it from the start. With the swing, it felt a little off to me. Now, reports were that he was a guy who could hit homers potentially down the line, have some power, and play a really good shortstop. From what I've heard, the playing a really good shortstop is still very much on the table. I think the bat is a concern. But if there's anything with the bat and you play a really good shortstop, that gives you a really nice floor to work with. So I think that's kind of what we're looking at with Acosta. Somebody who you're probably just hoping you get enough out of the bat and that the glove really plays up to an elite level, which it might. There's a real possibility of that. But if it doesn't, then he's probably somebody who falls off pretty quickly. And that's kind of what you're looking at right now. If the glove isn't as good as it's capable of being, it's probably going to be hard for him to really move too quickly in the system. And that ends up in some of the guys we won't be touching on the ACL list because they just are kind of organizational depth at this point. But that's how I'm looking at Acosta. The other shortstop here, though, I want to touch on is Christian Montilla. Overall season numbers, nothing special. 92 WRC plus. He didn't hit a homer. He was only 8 for 15 on stolen bases. The video I've seen of him is super, super interesting. This is a guy who I like the swing. I like the glove work. He's just somebody that I find very intriguing on video. He's only going to be just turned 18 as the ACL season starts next year. Super interesting guy for me that is based more off of limited looks than production, but also he had a great finish to the season after a super, super slow start. So perhaps showing what he's actually capable of that we didn't see early in the season. But all three of those guys, Joseph, what are your thoughts on Done, Acosta, and Montilla?
Yeah, I have Done and LaFond essentially together, as in, like, I don't know what we have here, but I like them both. And that might be delusional, but I like them both. So we'll see where that goes. Acosta's best month was his last month, but even still, it was not a great month. He just, at the plate, he appeared to just struggle all season. But yeah, the defense is his calling card there. And if he can just make some progress there, he's still going to get opportunities. Montilla, I mean, he's really interesting. I've seen probably similar videos you've seen, movement. And if you remember, I was one of the early people who was pointing to the movement abilities of Tyler Rodriguez. Boy, that's like the third time we've brought up Tyler Rodriguez. It's pretty funny. Who ended up playing a really solid left field in Carolina, out of all things. Yeah, Montilla's interesting to me. I really like him. His best defensive grade was actually at second base, which is interesting. And there's a little, the Brewers have no shortage of intriguing guys to cover second base. That's very obvious across multiple levels. So, yeah, I think Montilla to me is the guy I left the season, especially after his torrid end, where I was kind of most excited about him in this coming season. And I see Acosta kind of in the same light as I see Kevin Aru, where I'm just like, well, is he ever going to figure it out? I don't know. And so I think Acosta is definitely a repeat guy. I think Montilla will be as well, but he might come first. I wouldn't even be surprised. So yeah, that's kind of my overall thinking on those three.
Yeah. That'll take us into our main catcher tandem here for debut catchers, at least. Isaias Chavez and then Johanderson Tarazona, which is one of my favorite names down there this year. Yeah. Those two both showed some very interesting things. So Chavez has a very strong arm. I know that. He's got a very good arm behind the plate. And I don't know exactly what the numbers were, but I know it's a strong arm. And I don't pay much attention to caught stealing numbers in the DSL because, frankly, your pitchers are rarely helping you out as a catcher at that level. It's pretty much reliant on bad jumps and maybe having a cannon of an arm like we've seen with like Cairo and Karobo the last few years. But I don't know what the numbers were, but I know he has a strong arm.
He caught 16%.
Some juice in the bat, and he had a solid season. It wasn't anything crazy offensively, and so it was a 109 WRC plus offensively. He was actually 9 for 10 on stolen bases. He's a pretty good athlete, it appears, from what you can see of him. And he poked 6 homers. So, like,
more than Kenny.
He hit the ball in the air a ton. Yeah. he hit the ball in the air a ton, and he only had 153 plate appearances too to get this done. So ground ball rate was only 25%. I love to see that because that means this is a guy who can impact the ball, and he's doing it in the air in the DSL with a pretty strong arm and some athleticism behind the plate. Like, those are guys I'm going to pay super close attention to as they move forward. And then on Arizona's side, I believe I actually did look at his earlier, but I don't remember the exact caught stealing rate. I think it was similar. It was around 15, if I remember right. He only had 85 plate appearances, but he posted a 131 WRC plus with a homer, a triple, and 5 doubles. He was 5 for 6 on stolen bases. He looks a little bit stockier than Chavez does right now. I'm not sure he's going to age into the athleticism as well as I think Chavez might, but right now moves well and very similar, only a 25% ground ball rate. So a guy who's hitting the ball in the air a lot, generally sprayed it pretty decently. It's a relatively even spray chart. He didn't pull the ball at extreme rates, which if you're hitting the ball in the air that much, you actually probably do want to see him pull the ball a ton because that's where you're going to get the power just by hitting the ball in the air and pulling it. But he's a switch hitter. And I mean, this is an interesting catching duo for two guys that neither were big signing bonus guys. Chavez was up there a little bit more. He was more in like, I think he had the 5th highest in the class, but it was still 500,000 ish, nothing groundbreaking. But two really fun guys, especially from what we can see so far with them. A couple of catchers you really want to keep an eye on as you move forward. I'll tie that into the question we got quickly here from Whistling Coyote, who asked, can you two talk about your impressions of the catching battery in the DSL? I don't track those players like you two do. In parentheses, amazing DSL reports daily at Brewer Fanatic. But I think I remember noticing they had some noticeable moments. I think I recall Rangel also switched into part-time catching mode. So I'll let you touch on, I already touched on all three of these guys, but kind of what did you see from your side of things on all three of them?
Yeah, well, let's just talk about all of them. I mean, honestly, we're right here. I think personally, you would be hard-pressed to find a better depth chart of catching across the board. I mean, there's 52 teams in the Dominican Summer League, so I might just be hyper bullish because I cover the Brewers, but man, you could take that all the way into the ACL and low A. Truly, they have catching coming out their ears right now. Look at the second season that Lugo had. Lugo had a fantastic second season. Rangel was in the All-Star game, for crying out loud. Clearly has massive improvements to make in the catching defensive. I mean, and that's where you get into the, like, looking at errors and pass balls. And fielding percentage in the DSL, it's hard to make, any true kind of clear assumptions there, just because you got very young pitchers and, it's all a little bit up in the air. But if you're just talking about from, like, even Sejas, another great name. I don't even know how you pronounce that. Kenyalix. It's an incredible name. He had a good season. He was playing more first base. He was kind of a backup catcher, but man, he had some power in there. Rangel had an incredible season at the plate, like absolutely incredible season. But yeah, so across the board, Tarazona, Chavez, Lugo, Sejas, Rangel. I mean, man, it was, and you could say, especially for the Gold, who really relied on their pitching staff. They had really like 4 or 5, and we'll get to them, pitchers that really held it together. They had less runs scored on than the DSL Blue. But you could argue that on the DSL Gold, and with an offense that was struggling, that the catching battery with Rangel was the sole reason why they were able to stay competitive. I mean, they just really output. And then you look at the Blue, and they were doing the same thing. So it's pretty surprising to see that. I'm extremely excited about the entirety of the catching depth chart from low A down to the DSL. Like, probably more excited than I should be. But I've heard really good things about the young man we drafted out of Missouri, whose name is evading me right now for some inexplicable reason. Help a brother out there if you can. Anyhow, he's down in the ACL now. And then if you take into consideration what was going on at the end of the season in what will now be Wilson with our 18-year-old there, my goodness, he was fantastic. Was that Kevin Garcia, if I remember correctly, off the top of my head? He was everything I saw of him. Everything I saw of him was just, it screamed a capable backstop with the bat, with the arm, with his body, with his movement. I just think we have a lot more depth there than people realize because we were so hyper fixated on Kurobo last year. We have a lot of guys, and it's going to be very, very fun to see how this all shakes out in the next 2 years. Great question. Excited that somebody actually pointed that out. Whistling dog, whoever you are, coyote, is it? So yeah, I all season, all summer long, I just kept going, wow, these catchers, they just keep producing, just keep hitting, which is not typically what we think of when we think of catchers at all. So it was a pleasant surprise, to say the least.
No. Indeed. All right, we will run through the rest of these guys quickly. So Francis Sosa, he's in the intriguing debut category because he did hit 6 home runs. A lot of the other stuff is pretty concerning. The strikeouts are very high. He didn't steal bases at a good rate, but I do know he has a very strong arm, and he hit some of those balls that he had 6 homers, but he also had some batted balls of like 108, 109. Definitely big power there, but a lot that he needs to improve on right now. Matthew Moses is not in too dissimilar of a category overall. Another guy who showed some pop, 4 homers, played. He played first, but he also played some third. He has some ability to kind of play around the infield. Pretty strong arm overall. But another guy, I would imagine you're going to see him repeat, and we'll see how it goes in his second season, but showed some pop, and he did actually limit strikeouts along with hitting for power. And another common theme here, crazy low 22% ground ball rate. So the DSL Brewers seem to have and maybe just generally who they're trying to sign, a clear objective to get the ball in the air, which as a guy who appreciates that, I think that's the right way. Now the question is, some of these line drive rates are pretty low too. Are you hitting them at the ideal angles? Who's to say? But he pulled the ball in the air a ton, and I think that's a little bit of a nice place to be able to build off of. Leonard Rijo is actually a very interesting one. He's very short, 5'7". He weighed 140 pounds at signing, and I would bet he's not much different right now. But he showed some good things early in the season, and an equal strikeout to walk ratio. On the whole, he was 21 of 24 on stolen bases. He's very oppo heavy with his approach, and at his size, that's not shocking. For me, it's somebody that if he adds some strength and starts to be able to kind of catch up to pitching as he moves forward, and most likely, again, repeating here, but he played a good shortstop from what I've heard at his size. So I would imagine he's probably not a long-term shortstop at that size, but definitely somebody who, again, kind of fits that mold of an interesting second base prospect. And then Yefer Lista was the last one we had here in the intriguing debut category. And he's kind of similar to the others, except his power was more in the extra base variety, and also just somebody who got some write-ups from people when he initially signed, and that's part of the reason he's here. He's somebody that should have some power, and he's younger than most of the guys in his class. A May birthday in 2008, so I mean, CC Sabathia was almost a Brewer at the time this kid was born. So we're talking a young dude. But yeah, I mean, he has an interesting profile. He's not showed a ton his first season, but it wasn't awful either. 93 WRC plus, like I said. So the other two on here, Yohan Gutierrez actually did end up getting cut after the season. And then Joseph kind of touched on Yannicker Lugo. And then, yeah, I would imagine it's Kenyalax, Sayas. And those are a couple other interesting catchers. So anything else you want to quickly hit on before we
just one
side
sentiment
of things for the DSL here?
Yeah, one sentiment would be that I remember distinctly having moments as I was writing the DSL reports this past summer, mentioning a key hit by Moses or Lista. And I made probably one too many cliches about parting the seas for Moses, which is just, it's grown worthy. But hey, when you're writing these daily reports, you're looking for anything to make it interesting. And so, yeah, those two popped for me in that, like, oh, hey, moment for Moses again. Oh, another moment for Lisa. That's interesting. But other than that, no, nothing more to add.
All right. We will move to the pitching side of things in the DSL here quick. So starting, we've split it up a little differently than last year because frankly, this was a much, much better group of pitchers than we have seen in the DSL for a while, or at least a lot more interesting than what we've seen in a while. At the very top, I think Dustin Mayorkin is the headliner of this group for me. A guy who I actually had found before he signed and was interested in. I didn't know what the velo was, but I liked the secondary stuff that I saw on video quite a bit. Velo turned out to be in like that 91 to 93 range from what I've heard. And the breaking stuff and the changeup are all very, very intriguing. He had a fantastic season. It was a 2.45 ERA, a 2.67 FIP. They were letting him go deep into games as the season progressed. He did not allow a home run. He only walked batters 3.7% of the time in the DSL. That is an unreal rate to have as a pitcher. And he also struck out 25.7% of hitters he faced. So a 22% strikeout to walk ratio, basically. That's really good in the DSL. And to go along with it, having already low 90s velo with a bunch of different pitches and a guy who turned 18 only a few days ago or about a month ago, I don't necessarily love. I think there's some, and he's a young kid, but there's some baby fat there that he's going to have to clean up, I think, as he gets a little older and gets through strength and development and everything else. But I like the delivery. I think he might be able to get a little more out of his legs. If people have seen Steven Cruz throw for the Brewers in their system, he reminds me a little bit of that, where it's like, ooh, I feel like you could get a little more out of your lower half than you're getting. And if he does, maybe there's another velo jump in there at some point too. But I mean, this kid can pitch, and he's doing it at a very, very young age and at a very high level that we just don't see in the DSL for Brewers pitchers very often, especially in deeper outings and stuff like they let him go. So this is my top guy from this group, but there are a couple other ones we'll touch on that are pretty interesting too. Is this kind of your guy from this group as well?
Yeah, I have him listed as my crowned jewel of the summer. Yeah, I mean, on that staff in particular, the DSL Blue pitching staff, especially in the relief, they had some struggle debuts, but man, to have a 7-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio as a just turned 18-year-old with, might I add, an absurd 336 BABIP, I was just like, well, okay. This is a guy who clearly has stuff, and he might even be, even with those great peripherals, maybe he's experiencing a little bad luck too. So I just, the pitcher out of everybody that, and there was a really good pitching year. He was the one I'm clearly most excited about.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty easy one for me for him. Like, these are just fantastic numbers that he put up this first debut season, and he will be in the ACL and hopefully in low A at some point next year pretty quickly. I think he's one of those guys who could move from the DSL pretty quickly.
Shout out Nicaragua.
Moving to our the Brewers are busy in Nicaragua. Raymond Sarmiento, another one you kind of pointed out to me earlier today as well, as somebody to watch as we go forward here. Another guy who they let go deeper into games. They let him operate as a true starter a decent amount. And he did a lot of good things. He was somebody that just really, the numbers don't blow you away like they do with a guy like Mayorkin, where it's just really jumps off the page at you. A 4.5 ERA, a 4.1 FIP. But again, it's a solid strikeout to walk ratio, also limiting walks at a very, very strong rate in the DSL, which is something that you just, again, don't see a ton of. He kept the home runs pretty limited. I believe he only gave up one over the course of the 42 innings, maybe two actually. And then again, just another starter type of guy who they let go out and throw starter innings. And I've seen some video. I like the changeup that I've seen from him on video. I don't know what the velo is. I can't really catch a glimpse of what his velo is on any of the video, but it looks like a pretty fun changeup, and that's always a good pitch to have in your arsenal as a starter.
Yeah, and 17 years old. That needs to be pointed out. Pitched as a 17-year-old the whole season. Only gave up 37 hits in over 40 innings. I mean, that's intriguing to me. And so, yeah, that's a guy I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah.
I'm gonna mute
On
here
the
and
other side,
let the puppy out. Okay, I'll be right back.
Yep, go for it. On the left-hand side of things, we've got Yohan Pena. This is a guy, he ended up on the All-Star. Did he make the All-Star team? He should have made the All-Star team. He had a very strong season. 3.25 ERA. He struck out 22% of hitters, only walked 8. Left side, it's not big velo. It's in the upper 80s right now, even sometimes in that 86, 87 range. But you'll see 90, 91 at times from him. It's a very good curveball, and I think he throws it a ton because all the video I see, he is throwing curveballs constantly. I think you're going to need to see the velo jump up. You're probably going to need to see him lean more on a fastball as he moves forward, because leaning that heavily on a curveball is pretty tough to do. But it's a lefty with a good breaking ball, and that is always going to be very interesting. And he clearly had a good idea of how to use it and how he likes to attack hitters. So I think that's a good place to start for any player, really. Gustavo Garcia, another guy, and like with the others, Pena used as a true starter. Gustavo Garcia, same thing for him. This is one he actually signed a little bit later. He was originally agreed to sign with the Arizona Diamondbacks, I believe, and they backed out for some reason. Don't know exactly what it was, but it worked out well for the Brewers. He had a 3.63 ERA. Not quite the strikeout stuff the other guys have had, only a 17.5% rate. Walk rate under 10 still. Not great, but also better than average in the DSL. The big thing with Garcia is his 57% ground ball rate. It's a heavy sinker thrown in the low 90s, getting up to even close to the mid 90s at times. Decent looking slider that I think will also help keep the ball on the ground a decent amount. I think it's an interesting profile for me. I think he's going to have to develop more secondaries, but that ground ball rate is something that can play. If you can continue to get ground balls at that high of a level, you can move through the system based off of pretty much just that. And I saw on video, like, there were broken bats. I think the heavy sinker just gets soft contact on the ground a lot for Gustavo Garcia. So he's one that's pretty interesting as well. So again, all of these guys getting true starts, being able to go deeper into games as the season progresses, just stuff we haven't seen a ton of, especially from first-year guys. And all of these guys are in their first year in the DSL. Normally, if you see that, it's from second-year players or guys who have already gone through a whole DSL season. Like the Brewers were more aggressive with these guys this year, and I think that says a lot about how they view them. Another Garcia to quickly touch on, Daniel Garcia. This is one we didn't see a ton of, actually. He was hurt to start the year. He did get written up as someone to watch before the season, after the signing period. But this is another lefty here. He had a 3.0 ERA in 7 games, only 18 innings. Another very, very high ground ball rate, 58%. Another guy who didn't strike out a ton, but also didn't walk very many at all. But that ground ball rate from the left side, it's a sinker. I've seen some video of it, and a good changeup for him as well. Those are things that those will play from the left side. A big ground ball rate with an interesting sinker and changeup combo, who they already were letting go. It was a small sample, but in his last start, last couple, he started getting stretched out as they were moving him along. Another guy I think they view as a starter. So that's, again, this is not normal. Like, people don't follow it a lot, but if you go back and watch last year's episode, which I wouldn't recommend, this is already going to be way too long for you, but if you do, you will find that there were way fewer people we were talking about like this than we are right now. We'll finish it off with 2 more. These are probably the iffiest of this group of starter candidates, I would say, although Steven Duran's very young. Carlos Galindo spent most of the season or all of the season at 17, but turned 18 very shortly after. this is one I put on here because he did start quite a bit and he threw a lot of innings, 46 innings this year. This is one I've seen some video of. I've seen him into the mid 90s with a fastball that seems to have some carry to it and a pretty decent breaking ball, and a guy they were letting go deep in the game. So just kind of reading tea leaves there. I think he's somebody that they like enough to continue starting. But it was a 4.08 ERA. Strikeout rate was only 14.5%, but the walk rate was a very strong 6.2%. He was more of a ground ball type, though, or a fly ball type, though, which makes sense with how the fastball looks on video. But he's one that he's a little older than the others for the most part. He didn't have quite the same results. He didn't have the strikeouts or the ground balls, but the stuff is intriguing, and they were having him start. So for me, that's just something to watch. And I'll finish with Steven Duran here, and then I will let Joseph jump back in on any of these names that he missed or I've already talked about. But Duran, it's an interesting one because he actually had way better results than you would probably guess looking at a lot of the peripherals. He had a 2.77 ERA, but he had a 19.1% strikeout rate. Not terrible, but not super exciting. And then his walk rate was much higher than the rest of these guys. It was 13.9%. His ground ball rate was solid. He did keep the ball in the park. He didn't give up any homers. He didn't give up very many hits. His BABIP against him was 179, and in the DSL as a pitcher, that feels very unsustainable. But this is he's right now only 17. His birthday was in July, so he spent part of the season as a 16-year-old.
Right.
I've seen some video of him. There's some velo there already as a 16-year-old that he was showing. Pretty decent breaking ball there. Like, I don't know that he knows exactly where his stuff is going right now, but he got good results. He did it as one of the younger pitchers in the entire organization. He's one that, again, they let start. They let him go a little bit deeper at times, and he did finish the season pretty well, or at least near the end. He had a couple really solid outings, I know. He was an all-star. I mean, the DSL all-star for pitchers especially is like who can go, who's able to pitch in this right now. But as a very young dude with solid results, like, he's one to watch as well. So, Joseph, I just talked about Yohan Pena, Gustavo Garcia, Daniel Garcia, Carlos Galindo, and Steven Duran. Any of those you'd like to hit on before we move to the others of note?
Yeah, I think I'm sure you were thorough as always. I think I'd just go right to Duran. The fact that he only allowed 10 hits in 26 plus innings is absurd. To me, with the not only was the walk elevated, he hit 10 batters in 26 innings. I think it's a mix of he's got really good stuff, but not only does he not know where it's going to land sometimes, and sometimes the hitters don't know either. And so to me, I was like, wow, that is highly intriguing, because if he already has some velo, that's a guy where if you could fine tune his location, then I feel like the results are sustainable. To me, that as they were a little bit of a byproduct of being in the DSL, but the fact that he was 16 is going to be 17 till next summer, I don't know. I'm absurdly excited. But more to your point, last year you looked at the pitching staffs and you were like, oh, okay. Yeah. And we had some atrophy with some of the lefties that didn't end up panning out that made it to low A. But man, there was immense depth across the board with starter innings. Like we have like at least like off the top of my head, 6 to 9 guys who pitched over 40 innings in the DSL, and they did it well. That's just really impressive.
Yeah, agreed. All right, we will move to this other list. I'm going to run through them quick, and then we will revisit a couple of them afterwards, just to make sure we're moving, because this might be longer than last year somehow. But starting with Josip Ospino. Now, this is the oldest guy I think on this entire list. He's 21 right now. He was 20 all season, but he's 21 now. The reason he's on is because I've seen video of him touching 97, and he's throwing, and he struck out 27% of hitters he faced this year. So he had a 2.93 ERA, definitely a relief type, definitely a guy who has some command issues. But when you throw close to upper 90s already and you're in the DSL, you're at least worthy of getting a little bit of a call out here. Derlene Garcia is actually quite similar from what I've seen. I've seen pretty big Veen, and he was 18 all season. 1.86 ERA, only 19 innings, but had the velo that I've seen, struck out 29% of guys. They did actually have him start a couple times. He went a little bit deeper into games at times, but that's one that's more based off of just some video and also a solid ERA and seeing some good things. Yohandry Ramirez, another guy that I've definitely seen some video of, like 93, 94. He had a 5.56 ERA. This one is not numbers based. This is purely off of seeing some good stuff from him. He throws his slider a ton on the video that I've seen. The walks were too high. The strikeouts weren't great, but the overall batted ball profile, it's a lot of grounders. It's not a ton of line drives. He didn't give up a homer, but the command is going to be a problem. And I think right now that's what you got to look at. But he was 17 most of the season and just turned 18 at the end of the season. So a younger arm compared to some of the others we just talked about. Christopher Peralta is the cousin of Freddie Peralta. Not a great second season in the DSL with a 5.84 ERA. But I have seen the delivery. It's very similar to Freddie. I've seen some of the stuff. You can see a little bit of like, oh yeah, he definitely watched a lot of Freddie Peralta as a kid and as he was growing up and coming through the minor leagues. I mean, even just like the delivery is very, very similar, especially to the young version of Freddie. Freddie's kind of changed it up a little bit, but the strikeouts were in a solid spot, 23%, but the walks were too high. There was more home run allowed than most DSL pitchers, about 1 per 9 innings, which was in the 27th percentile overall. So like there's stuff there. There's interesting things. If he wasn't Freddie Peralta's cousin, he may not have made the list. But there's enough there and the bloodlines to at least give him a shout out. Now, the next one I'm going to talk about is probably the most random to most people. Brian Regalado. He only threw in 2 games. He threw an inning and a third, and he had a 20.25 ERA. I've seen video of this dude touching 96 with a changeup that he throws at 83 that falls off a table and a pretty decent looking breaking ball. Now, again, he pitched in 2 games, so that's why I'm basing it off of purely the look of the stuff. You don't know how those 2 games went, and I do think command's going to be an issue because even in his highlight videos that he's posting on his Instagram, the ball's getting sprayed a little bit. So you don't know necessarily where it's going, but an 18-year-old who's throwing mid-90s with a nasty changeup, I'm going to call that out as somebody that's at least worth taking a peek at and following next year.
Yeah.
Well, I would imagine he repeats the DSL.
I'm going to interject here with Regalado. It's important to note that the 2 games here, he was on the restricted list. So we don't know what was going on, family, personal. And then he came off of it later, I believe, but then he never saw the diamond again. So I had him asterisked as well because I was like, I've seen things that are interesting, but we didn't really get to see him. So that's all I want to say.
Yeah. No, that's a good call. And he was a later signing too. So that there was quite a bit going on. It was probably a little hectic as he got into pro ball, but the stuff is interesting. Albert Vargas, this is just a guy didn't again do super well, but I saw a video when he signed. He was signed as a 19-year-old. He was signed late in the process as well. But I saw flashes of like he actually had video of some TrackMan data on his stuff, which is very rare for DSL pitchers to get any glimpse of that. He spun the ball well. He was very inconsistent with the shapes of the pitches, even in the video he was showing. But the top end movement that he showed on all his pitches was pretty interesting. And he was doing it at 93, 94 on the fastball. So again, this is more just let's call him out as a name to at least keep an eye on as we go forward. Santiago Martinez. This is another one that got a little bit of a shout out from, I believe he was written up by Baseball America before the season, if I'm not mistaken, but he only ended up pitching in 3 games, only went 3 innings, didn't strike anyone out and had a bunch of walks. But again, 17-year-old, he was 16 most of the season. Lefty who got a write-up because the stuff was interesting enough from Baseball America, and then he only pitched in 3 games. So that's why we're mentioning him here. Gabriel Colmenares, he ended up actually moving stateside later in the season, finishing in the ACL. But overall, had a solid season. He was doing very well in the DSL. Wasn't quite as good in the ACL, but a really solid season overall. But we're talking about him here. We're not going to mention him in the ACL portions that we still have to get to here. And then 4 guys that I didn't initially have on here because I missed them a little bit. But Joseph did call them out as guys that we should probably talk about, and he's absolutely correct. Carlos Canales, he's a 19-year-old. He was 19 all season. He'll be 20 by the time the season starts next year. But he had 2.16 ERA and a 59% ground ball rate. That's absolutely going to be noteworthy when people are getting the ball on the ground that much and getting results like that, even as a 19-year-old. He's somebody that he was signed in 2023. So I would imagine we're looking at a guy who probably is either ACL bound or they're going to move on soon. But I'd imagine we see him stateside and he at least gets a chance to see if he can continue to improve upon what he did this year. Dariel Jaquez, this is a guy we talked about at the end as someone who came off of the IL at the end of the season. So the stuff we saw in 31 innings was quite good. He did a lot of good things. He had 29 strikeouts. Now the walks and the hit by pitches added up to 22 of them in 31 innings. So that's pretty high, but clearly the stuff is there. He had a batting average against of only 129. I would say similar to what we talked about with Regalado, like this is probably a guy who the stuff is there, but maybe not necessarily the command or the idea of where it's going right now. So he's missing barrels. He's got guys kind of uncomfortable in the box. It's just a matter of how is it going to translate to the next level when he does eventually move up into the ACL. Manuel Moreno, another one here. He had a guy who made a lot of starts this year, 42 innings, 7 starts, 11 games pitched total, struck out 32 to 19 walks and 3 hit by pitches. So that's, again, not a great ratio, but very limited in terms of the hits against him, the batting average against him. His strikeout to walk ratio was very good his first season in 2024, as Joseph kind of pointed out to me. It's a 5.17 strikeout to walk. It was 31 to 6. And then we just talked about what it was this year, 32 to 19. So that's interesting. If you get the first version and you combine it with the ability to limit hits, like that's a really interesting arm. It's a matter of, do you get that moving forward? Right. And then finally, Justin Lugo, he was in his second year in the DSL as well, out of the bullpen pretty exclusively, 22 innings, and he struck out 29, but he also had 22 free passes combined between the walks and the hit batters. The BABIP doubled basically from 2024 to 2025. So the ERA doesn't look great, especially with all those free passes, but really with all those free passes and a high BABIP, a 4.5 ERA is actually pretty impressive, right, because you would expect more runs to have come across. So he's another guy I've seen some video of. The stuff is definitely there, but clearly some command issues for him. So ran through all of those guys. Anything you want to kind of double up on or hit on too?
Yeah, I think just closing it with, if we've already waxed poetic on the catchers, well, look at the pitchers, man. There's a lot of pitching. And this is, I would just opine that we have not had the riches of potential like this. I don't know if we've ever, since there's just a lot of guys here. And if we then kind of transpose that to what we saw last year with guys who got better out of the complex to low A, I think we have every reason to have some conservative excitement here. Like that we could have some diamonds going on that are surprising. And then the last thing I would say is, if we remember, go all the way back to Kurt Hoag's article after the international signing class, the headliner on the pitching side was Yuri Ramirez. He's no longer in the organization. He signed with the Tigers after some type of snafu with age. That what I had heard from people was that it wasn't anything like malicious. It was that he probably qualified for a different signing period, and because of that, it had a reboot. And the Tigers signed him for like $25,000 less. I think he was slated to sign for $300K, but he was the one who was specifically targeted in that article as the headliner. And then this is what we see is just a breadth of depth. Very exciting.
Yeah, And they made it a point that they've talked about. They want to improve on they love what they're doing offensively in international markets, but they really want to improve on the pitching side. And I think this year was a really good step in the right direction for them.
Great start.
So moving into the ACL here, and the good news is far fewer players to cover here because a lot of them moved to the Carolina at some point, or this just wasn't quite the level of talent we've seen other years at the ACL level. But we're going to move through these relatively quickly, but we got a decent amount of questions on a bunch of these guys too. So our top tier MLB caliber tools, I think there's a clear level of upside and also more current ability with these two guys we're going to talk about than anyone else we're going to talk about in this level. Juan Ortuño, and I want to say Handle Fry, but it's Handelfrey Encarnacion. I wish it was Handle Fry. It should be Handle Fry. I petition him to call himself Handle Fry.
Let's start the movement.
But these are both two guys that ended up seeing time in Carolina, or Ortuño at the very, very end, a very small sample. Yeah. But two guys who were tearing it apart, especially in the ACL throughout the early parts of the season. Ortuño, before he got hurt, was tearing the cover off the ball down there. And I'm just going to jump into the questions we got, so I make sure we don't answer them first. But not Bob Kozlowski asks, both Handelfrey Encarnacion and Pedro Ibargüen, who we'll get to in a second, he's in our next tier, had nice ACL seasons and got their call-ups to A-ball last season. Between the two of them, who are you most excited about heading into 2026? For him, he leans Handelfrey. Feel like he should smell some top prospect list with a nice season and is ready to take the next leap. But Pedro really impressed me last year as well. Both are fun in his opinion. Would love to hear who you're most excited about. Thanks as always. So for me, it's Handelfrey pretty easily. And like I said, they're in a different tier for me on this list, and I think that's the way it should be. Handelfrey makes fantastic swing decisions. Very little chase. Very, very few times watching pitches over the heart of the plate go by. He impacted the ball. He had upper level exit velocities that matched pretty much anybody in that level, especially at that age. Because I think it's also important to remember that Handelfrey is still at this moment only 18 and a half. He won't be 19 until mid-June of next season. So he's very young for where he is in the system right now. His 90th percentile exit velocity was actually 103.9, which would have been 50th percentile-ish at the upper levels of the minors and in Major League Baseball even. So he shows an ability to impact the ball. He struggled in A-ball. We're not going to talk about him there. We're just focusing on wherever they had the most at-bats. But for Encarnacion, I really like the swing. I love the approach. I love that he had a strikeout rate under 17, even with some struggles when he got to low A. There's power. There's a good approach. And also the defense, I think, needs some work in the outfield, but he also showed some ability to cover some ground. And a pretty decent arm. He made a really nice throw to gun a guy at the plate one time when I was watching the game. So there's just a lot to like there. And focusing on him and Ortuño for now. We had a question about him too. So Daniel asked us what's in store for Juan Ortuño in 2026 after a respectable but abridged 2025. So Joseph, on both those questions, I already answered my part of the Handle Fry one, but for Ortuño and Encarnacion, kind of what are you looking at for 2026, and who do you like the most out of this group of three, we'll say, with Ibargüen too?
Yeah, I think Ortuño starts in Wilson. I have no reason to believe he would.
I agree.
Hold on one second. We have a puppy disaster going on here, folks. I'm sorry.
No worries. I will keep it moving. So yeah, I agree with Joseph. I think he is going to start in 2026 in Wilson with the Warbirds, the new Carolina Mudcats. Ortuño showed really good contact skills, plate discipline, all of that in the DSL, but he only had a 96 mile per hour 90th percentile exit velocity and a 99 mile per hour max exit velo in the DSL in 2024. Both of those jumped in a major way in 2025. His 90th percentile went to 102, and he maxed out at 109. So
Wow.
his max exit velocity jumped 10 miles per hour, and his 90th percentile jumped 6.
That's incredible.
The swing decisions and the contact didn't get any worse. They both remained well above average. And he also raised his barrel rate from 5% to 14%. So all the things you would want to see from a guy like him, you saw. It was a small sample. It was only 105 plate appearances, but the max exit velo stuff doesn't really lie. Like some of the average stuff over a course of a short sample could lie a little bit. The max stuff doesn't. You jumped 10 miles per hour. You had a very legitimate jump in your power output. So if the power can be there, and he's a smaller guy, he's 5'8", but if the power can be there enough to really impact the ball, and he's a good athlete, he has great plate discipline, really good just idea of what he's doing at the plate, and plays, from what I saw, decent defense, and what I've heard, decent defense at a few different spots. Like, that's a fun prospect. That's a really, really solid prospect with a lot of good things going for him. So that's how I'm looking at it for him moving forward. But yeah, if you want to hit on either of those now,
Yeah.
Joseph, that you're back.
Yeah. You know, as some players make bad swing decisions, I will say puppies make bad chewing decisions. So he was chewing on my daughter's craft basket. So I had to redirect. Thank you for your patience. Anyhow, yeah, and I would also say Ortuño's defense reads really, really good, and that he had an anomalous couple errors right off the bat in Carolina. I don't attribute it to anything other than late season returning and whatever. You know, like can't even read. It's such a small sample size. I will just say to not Bob Kozlowski's question, I believe it was, that with Ibargüen, I think he had a great beginning when he came up to Carolina, surprisingly so. However, he's got a pretty long path through the strike zone, takes big swings. And as he got more innings, that kind of started to bite him in the butt, so to speak. Handlefry is much younger, and he has all the tools there that you look for in somebody at the plate. The only concern I have for Handlefry is, can he get his, and again, this goes back to youth. So if one thing I learned about last season, it's to leave the youthful defensive kind of anomalies, give him a little more room to grow. He looked a little lackadaisical on the outfield grass, looked like he was losing tracking balls. I don't know if that had to do with being in new stadiums. I don't know if it had to do with just the adjustment period. You know what I mean? So that's something I'll be looking forward to. I have a question about his arm. I don't know if he has it really, but I didn't really see him have to unleash it. So other than that, I think offensively, man, he's got a pretty lefty swing, and that's going to be the bread and butter. So that's going to be a really exciting player to watch. And I mean, if you just look today, Ibargüen's back on the ACL roster today. He's listed there, whereas Handlefry is very clearly not. He's in Wilson.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if he sticks back with Wilson. I think he will, because I think he did enough. But if I were to make an analogy, I saw Ibargüen as a rich man's Harry Holguin in the outfield by the end of the season. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. And so I think he can do some things. I think it's going to take a much longer, and I think he's going to have a harder road.
Yep. I would agree with all of that. So we won't touch more on Ibargüen. Let's move to the two catchers that I think are definitely worth discussing here. Luis Corobo, we talked about a lot last year, as you mentioned. Didn't quite hit how you would hope to have seen in the ACL. Strikeouts were a bit high. Didn't hit any homers. Line drive rate was actually very strong at 28%. So that gives me a little hope in terms of the batted ball profile, but a lot of grounders outside of those. And a very oppo heavy approach, which is always going to be a little tough. I saw some swings on video, and I think he just is not getting his lower half into the swing at all, which is a problem, obviously, but it also might be something that can be fixed for a young guy like him. The arm, I mean, the numbers aren't fantastic in the ACL this year, but again, that's another one where it's like, that's a lot of it's going to be on the pitching. I have seen pop times that are very, very good for Corobo. He has a cannon of an arm. I think the defense in general is pretty solid, but the bat is going to have to be better than it was this year for sure. Kevin Garcia is the one you mentioned a little bit earlier too. We saw him in low A actually kind of surpassed Kurobo, and he did it as a guy who was barely 18 when he first got to low A.
Absurdly
Garcia
impressive.
overall on the whole had a 100 WRC plus. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. He showed quite a bit to me. Like the glove looked solid behind the plate. The arm looked solid behind the plate. He clearly has some juice in the bat. He hit 5 homers overall. Overall a 100 WRC plus. It was a very heavy strikeout season, though. Still 30% strikeouts and only a 6% walk rate. I like the swing quite a bit. So he pulls the ball a ton. He gets it in the air quite a bit. I think there's a lot of good ingredients here, but I do worry that sometimes guys who pull the ball in the air a lot are also just starting their swing too early to adjust to breaking stuff. And I would imagine that's going to be something he has to continue to work at. But this is a guy who made it to low A, barely 18 years old as a catcher. That's not common.
No.
I think there's a lot to be said about that and how the Brewers kind of view him. So right now, I'm not going to nitpick too much. I just think there's a lot to like here, and there's a lot of stuff that he still needs to work on. But at the same time, it's a pretty good starting point for a guy like him.
100%. I like both guys. The weaknesses, as you pointed to, that's spot on. With Garcia in particular, I would just say, having seen a lot of guys go through Carolina in the last 3 to 5 years, I can honestly say that other than Caro, just thinking off the top of my head, well, obviously, you had Matt Wood there as well, but Garcia he looked the part. And just like everything about his movement behind the dish, he was confident, he was moving well, covering, good glove, better arm than I thought, and then the swing showed potential. And he hit when he was there, he had strikeouts, but he still hit for almost 270. Like I think it was like 265. Like just had and he had some key hits as well. There's just a lot there. And that age thing, you can't overlook that. Like holding your own at just turning 18 in that league as a catcher, highly impressive. And just to full circle wrap up my earlier brain fart, Rylan Mills is the catcher we drafted who I've heard quite a bit of good things about from the people I've talked to in Arizona. Apparently, the hit tool is more evolved than we realize, and that's pretty exciting. So there's another catcher throw in the mix, another unheralded that appears to have a good baseline to work from. So,
yeah. Yes, indeed. So we'll finish this off with Frederi Montero in this tier. Montero's a guy that I've heard some really good things from people who have seen him down there. 94 WRC plus, nothing crazy. Really high line drive rate at 26%. But he also had a 90th percentile of 103.5. So impacting the ball quite well for a guy who's not 19 yet. He'll be 19 in January. He's 6'2", 188. He hit no homers, but he hits the ball hard. And he hits the ball on a line. And to me, those are the guys that it just takes a little bit of a change. And all of a sudden, that turns into home runs or triples or doubles. Very good mover from what I've seen and heard. Guy who can handle shortstop, but probably a little too big and ends up at like a third base spot where he's going to have to obviously impact the ball a little bit more if he ends up there. But an interesting name, a guy that I kind of have pegged as like a guy to watch for a breakout next year. As somebody that's not really on the radar for most people, as somebody that like a lot of the below the hood, under the hood stuff is a lot better than what you would think based on the results. So, he's the last one in that tier. Do you have anything on Montero before we kind of finish off with 3 more of these guys?
Nope, nothing more than that. That's great. Love it.
All right. In the final group, we have Roderick Flores, an infielder. We have Angel Paulino, an outfielder. And then we have Jaden Fielder, who played second base and some outfield. I want to touch on Fielder first because I think that's the one that if people look at the numbers, people are probably confused as to why he never really got a shot in low A. And he had a 137 WRC plus, an 870 OPS. He had 3 homers. He had 5 triples. Definitely a much different and better athlete than his dad was in terms of speed and agility. He was 20 and then 21 at the end of the season, so older than most prospects are at the level. Reports are there's not much of a defensive spot for him at the moment, and they haven't been able to quite find one for him. But man, that's good production, and there's legitimate juice in the bat, and the swing is fun. It's explosive. Do I think he's like a top prospect? No, I don't. But do I think he's worth just still keeping an eye on? And do I think he probably ends up in Carolina at least somewhat early next season? Yeah, I do. I think he's somebody who, more than I thought when they signed him, is worthwhile as at least to keep an eye on how he's doing and how he's progressing. And can he find a defensive spot? I think those are all going to be very important things for him. But there is quite a bit to like in how he performed and what we saw from him this year. So I don't know exactly where it goes from here, but I do think he's an interesting guy to keep an eye on. Joseph, do you have anything on him or even Flores or Paulino? All three of them are, I think, guys that are legitimately worthy of attention, but maybe not quite as sure as some of the other guys in the upper level tiers we had there.
Yeah, I like all three. Flores had a pretty good reputation when he first signed. Yeah, Paulino's done some good things.
Mm-hmm.
I think also with Jaden, which is unfair, is that he's going to have the ghost of Prince Fielder over him. And so
Oh, yeah.
he's very much, as you spoke to, he's very much a different player and a different athlete. But he's just going to inevitably, just by proxy, he's going to have that extra hurdle to earn. If it's fair or not, I don't personally think it is, but it's just the nature of things. However, major kudos to him for having a season and validating the fact that he actually is a prospect and it wasn't a name signing. I think a lot of people look at it, oh, he's an undrafted free agent signing kind of thing, or like just a minor league free agent signing. Can't remember off the top of my head, but he had a very good season, impactful season. But then you look at, well, he's playing second base, playing a little corner outfield. There's just a glut of guys that are younger that are going to get those opportunities because they want to see that first. It's just the nature of it. So he's going to have to do a little bit more. And that's just the nature of the piece. But knowing from what I've heard, he's a very hard worker. So I have no doubt he's going to hit it. He's going to hit it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I know on Paulino quickly too, he had one of the larger jumps in 90th percentile exit velocities. Baseball America mentioned that at one point this offseason, he jumped about 6 miles per hour in that regard, only at 102.9. So he was starting at a pretty low point, but very good athlete.
Massive.
19 of
yeah.
Oh yeah. And 19 of 21 on stolen bases. So like adding some pop to that is a big deal. Now he did strike out almost 35% of the time. So that's going to have to improve, but already
also
made
massive.
Also massive, yes. But yeah, that'll wrap up the hitting side of things, and then we'll touch on these pitchers quickly here. So again, pretty big group of starter types, more than you normally see. So Tyler Renz, for me, is of the guys who didn't actually end up spending most of their time in Carolina, and that is Ethan Dorches and Jaden Dubanowitz. Those two we'll talk about when we get to the low A portion of things, but those two were clearly the top two of this group. Renz for me is next. Was 18 the entire season, turned 19 in November, so just recently. The velo is definitely not high, like it's upper 80s at best right now. He'll touch low 90s at times. He's hit 96 in bullpens before, so I think there's some on the way, but he's very skinny. He's got to add some good weight and some good mass to his frame, I think, to be able to hit it more consistently. But there's just really good characteristics on the pitches. The fastball has a ton of ride. He's got some cut ride action to it. It's a good assortment of secondaries where he can kind of mix a bunch of different ones in. He knows how to pitch pretty well. He was doing very well in his debut in low A, and then I think he just completely wore out, and the numbers overall didn't end up looking great because he just walked a bunch of guys at the end of his first outing out there or up there. But I'm a big Tyler Renz fan. I think that's a really good ball of clay that they're going to get to continue to work with. A couple other guys who moved up to Carolina, Anderson Mercado and Macias Mercedes. Two guys who moved together from the DSL to the ACL this year. Both of them showed really interesting stuff, I would say. Mercedes, velo has been up to like 96 for him at times. Pretty good looking slider that he throws pretty hard. Changeup. I don't hate the movement on it, but he throws it probably way harder than they would want him to. So there's not enough separation on it. He's a bit of a project, but he's another one. He only turned 19 in July. So like he'll start next year as a 19-year-old who already has been in low A. There's some good stuff there to work with for him. Anderson Mercado, I actually didn't like the stuff I've seen from him. I haven't loved the stuff, but he's done pretty well, and he did pretty well after moving to low A. He's a lefty with some sink on the fastball, younger than either of the other two we talked about, though. He's still 18. He'll be 19 in late March. But a lefty who got good results in low A for at least a portion of his time there. He showed some really good flashes. He got more swing and miss than I would have guessed he would get. Mercado's interesting. I would like to see a velo jump or something before I get too excited because I just don't know about the stuff in general. But again, a 17-year-old or an 18-year-old all season who's going to be 19 all of next year and already in low A, like from the left side, you gotta be interested, at least intrigued by that. On those three specifically, we'll get to the next three in a second, but those three, anything you'd like to add or anything you saw from those three in your viewing, because all of them did end up in low A.
Yeah, I agreed on Renz. Mercedes was somebody that I was really excited about given the early DSL output and just his tools, but man, he was wild in Carolina. He came in amped and never turned down the volume. So I kind of left like, I don't really know what we have here. Anderson surprised me in his efficacy. Honestly, I just, it was like, oh, okay, another smaller, low velo lefty, but man, he got results. He had several outings where he really did, and it surprised me. So he's intriguing, but my little pause there is that I've seen several low soft tossing lefties that I've fallen in love with as Brewers prospects that ultimately are released. And so yeah, I'm just a little more conservative. And the age is always applicable. So hopefully he can find it. But knowing the Brewers as well with age, they're not going to work on that velo for another year or two. So he'll have to see if he can still work with his tools he has, more than likely.
Yeah. Moving to Carlos Cara, this is one that I'm just a really big fan of. Cara, probably one of the higher discrepancies I would have probably to most people that would be looking at him. Like, this is a guy that I love the stuff.
Me too.
He just turned 19 in November as well. We saw him debut in low A, and he had a really solid first start there. It was a 4.3 ERA. He struck out 24% of batters to only a 5% walk rate. Really, really strong there. And I just like the stuff. It's a big curveball. It's a fastball with some good carry on it. I like the changeup. I think he has a really good arm action on the changeup and takes enough off of the fastball for it to play. We've seen the velo get up towards like 94, 95 at times, kind of sits that 92, 93. But as an 18-year-old, like, I just really like the tools he is working with as somebody moving forward, as somebody that I would pick as a potential breakout this offseason, I would say for sure. Yeah, he's one of my favorites in the org that probably doesn't get a ton of attention. Quickly to touch on the other two. Yeah, I don't get it, but I think we'll see it. I think we'll see it once he gets his chance in low A for a full season here. I think people will start to kind of catch on with him. With the other two quickly here in the starter candidates. So we got Griffin Tobias. We talked about him when the injury list came through. He was a guy who got hurt at the end of the season, thought it was a worse injury than it ended up being. It actually turns out he should be fine for next year. It looked like it was going to be much worse than that when you saw the video of it. But he had interesting for me, like, he's another guy where I don't know that I was fully buying some of the high ERA in the ACL, because he actually like completely limited walks at an insane rate when he was in the ACL. The strikeouts aren't great. I've seen some of the metrics on the stuff. It's interesting. I wouldn't say it's bad by any means. And there's some velo there for a guy who was a high schooler, but he was an older high schooler. He is already 20 as of July. So for me, of that group, this is probably the one I'm least intrigued by, but at the same time, there are characteristics that I find interesting, and a very, very low walk rate is always going to catch my eye for a young pitcher too. So there's stuff to work with here. He's not somebody that I personally rank super highly, but he is somebody that if he came back and he's throwing a little harder and suddenly he looks a lot better in my like that wouldn't shock me by any means. And then the final one here, Hayden Robinson, barely he was coming off of Tommy John, did not have great results in the ACL this year. Only 12 total innings, 12 and a third total innings coming off of the IL. The walks were way up. We saw really, really good stuff from him in 2024 before he got hurt. 2025 was a struggle after he came back. However, this is a guy who had great breaking stuff and a great changeup, who had low velo before his injury. And the first game back, he was touching 94, 95 in his return. So, like, there's been a little bit more of a velo jump along with what I already know was good secondaries. I don't care about the 12 inning results. I just care that he came back and added something to his game that he didn't have before. I'm anticipating him starting in Carolina next year. I think that's where he'll be as a 20-year-old. I think he's somebody who, again, I could see having a bit of a breakout that, especially if you look at the small sample this year, no one would really be expecting to see. So that's the group of starters. On those last three, Joseph, anything you'd like to add on them?
Yeah, love Kara. Like love Kara. I think the tunneling resemblance his changeup and his heater have are so remarkable. Like his changeup, like just absolutely fools hitters. And it's I don't know. I'm just like and I've had to rewatch some of him a couple times. You'd be like, wow, that is a changeup. Holy cow. And he's got a nice breaking ball.
Yeah.
Like really nice. So it's just like, oh man, I think he's a leading candidate to enter top 30 this year, personally. And then
I would agree.
Hayden Robinson pre-injury, he was one of my favorite pitchers out of all those cut-ups in that ACL season. Was it 2024? I was so happy that he got back healthy. I think I totally mirror your sentiments there that he could surprise a lot of people, especially I didn't know he was touching 94, 95. That changes everything. Because his breaking stuff was filthy. Like it moved two directions. It was just like, woo, people didn't know what was coming. So if he can keep that off of Tommy John, woo. And if I remember, Tobias, did he not, like he got injured, but he avoided Tommy John? I think it was like, that he didn't get. Do you remember? Because he left injured. It was his last outing where he got knocked around for 7 hits, but he was clearly injured. And if you knock off that outing, he really only averaged like a hit an inning. Like it wasn't terrible.
He got best case scenario news.
Great. Yeah, I think I remember. And shout out to Adam Shefsky again. That's his high school teammate. So I'm already rooting for him. Yeah, his stuff, like, to me, when I watch Griffin, I'm like, okay, I like what's here, but I feel like he doesn't walk a lot of guys because he offers too much hittable pitching. And so I would like to see him moving forward, work on working the edges and being unafraid to get a walk here and there. And I think that could up-level his stuff, but time will tell.
Yeah, I would buy that. I think that's a real thing for sure. So moving to the others of note, Joshua Quezada, we saw him at the end of the season in low A. Numbers in the ACL just not good. And I still don't get how that happened. I don't understand what caused that. He struck hitters out at a good level. He had a high ground ball rate. He didn't walk very many at all. And the stuff is good. Like it's a really nice looking sinker from it's a relatively normal slot. So I think the sinker plays up a little better than you would expect. The slider is what is very interesting to me. It has like 10 inches of carry on it while also having over 10 inches of glove side movement. Like that's not normal at all. That is a different outlier type of slider that people do not have. And it messed with guys in low A when he got there. Like that was tough. Hitters did not look comfortable against him at all. I think there's quite a bit here for me to dream on like a legitimate reliever moving forward. And I was just shocked by seeing his ACL numbers because it just didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, it didn't make any sense at all. And also, this is our moment to tip our caps to one Clayton Andrews and put our hats to our chest and say thank you for giving us an exciting low A pitcher.
Yes, that is the gift that keeps on giving, Clayton Andrews. Wenderlin King, another guy who had a really interesting year in the ACL, where again strikeouts at a solid 24%, walks at a solid 8%. His issue was the home run ball, and he gave up 1.42 per 9. That is very, very high. I've seen the stuff. I like the changeup. I like the breaking balls. I don't know about the fastball shape. I haven't seen numbers on it. My guess, based on the home run numbers, that is the issue he's running into. If I were to guess, that the fastball just doesn't quite play how you'd like it to. That said, he was 19 most of the year. He's 20 now. He's a shorter guy. If you can figure out how to make a fastball play, I think the other stuff's going to play. So if you can limit the homers, that was really what did him in this year. Everything else about his profile looks pretty solid. So that's one to watch moving forward. I have a couple on here that I know you probably were a little confused by me putting them on here. So Cesar Espinal, we acquired him from the Royals last offseason, and I can't remember off the top of my head who the trade. I can't remember who they traded for him, but either way, they got him from the Royals. The numbers were not very good. It was a FIP over 5. It was an ERA of almost 8. Strikeouts and walks were almost even. This is one that the data I got on his fastball is very interesting. It's pretty high carry from a very low slot, I should say. And it's been into the 95 range. So for me, it's the fastball along with a decent slider, a decent curveball, 2 different shapes, decent spin on both of them. He's a little older than you would want for a guy who seems like that much of a project, but this is also the second time he's been traded, which I always take note of. That seems, to me, that means organizations are taking note of him and noticing him, and there's something there. And for me, my guess is it's the fastball because I think that's an interesting pitch. So that's why he's on here. Allende Bravo, also similar.
Just so you know,
yeah, go ahead.
He was the official, and you're going to love this, the player to be named for the Mark Conha trade.
Yes, that makes sense. I was trying to figure out who we traded to the Royals, but yes, I forgot about that. That was a spring training move, so that does make sense. Bravo. So Bravo, strikeout rate, nothing crazy. Walk rate, really solid at 5.2%. This is not the one I was even meaning to bring up. I was meaning to bring up Aparicio, so I'll get to him in a second. Bravo is interesting because he limits walks really well. Had a great start in the DSL in his first start, and then he moved to the ACL where he got ground balls at a really high rate, over 50%, limits walks. I think you're going to probably need to see more strikeout stuff from him moving forward, but he is an interesting one who adjusted decently from that jump stateside, which is very rare these days. Normally that happens during the offseason. They did it very quickly this year. The one I meant to go to is Argenis Aparicio, and the only reason he's on here is a 7.5 ERA, 6 FIP, not a great strikeout rate, not a good, a decent walk rate, not great, but not bad. Gave up some homers. This is a guy who was a two-way when they signed him, and he was actually more hitter than pitcher. The stuff I've seen is he can get to the mid-90s. He's a guy who's learning how to pitch despite being a little older than you would think for a guy who's in that mold. It's more based on the lack of experience for me, and then the fact that he's kind of new to pitching with decent stuff. Just he's worth a continued look for me. I don't think they're going to give up on him, but I do think this will be the year that they look at him and go, we got to see it now. Like we're getting into that, true third season of pro baseball, fourth season even, pro baseball. And you have been focused on pitching now for 2 years, so we got to see what you got at this point. But the stuff and the fact that it's so raw to me is why I put him on here. And then the last one I'll talk about is Doris Mora. This is one that we also, I got a glimpse of some of the StatCast data, and it is a heavy sinker, like very heavy, like super interesting sinker. He's almost 22, and he was pitching in the ACL. So, like, he missed all of 2024, I believe.
He missed
but
2
he had a
seasons.
67% ground ball rate against him. Did he miss 2? Okay.
Yeah,
so
he
like
since 2022.
67% ground ball rate. Okay. So yeah, I mean, like that high of ground ball rate, it was a 2.08 ERA though, with the walks at 16%. The FIP didn't really like what they saw from him, but you're getting that many grounders, and you showed a 24% strikeout rate, and the fastballs I saw were in that 93, 94 range with that much sink. Like, definitely worth keeping an eye on. I'd imagine at 22 he will be in Carolina, and it'll be put up or shut up time for him to see how he does. But somebody who out of the pen with that much sink and that much type of ability to generate ground balls, as we hit the 3-hour mark, I'm forgetting how to talk. Generate ground balls. We are looking at an interesting arm, at least despite the advanced age. So that is everybody. Do you have anyone you'd like to point out from that group? And then we'll wrap this up at 20 minutes longer than last year.
Yeah, right. Not at all. Not at all. And I think it's great to end with Mora there. Just that, facing adversity in life and in pitching, misses 2 seasons, but comes back and pretty much improves. Not a stellar season by any measure, but improves upon every mark across the board. Had a healthy year. He's going to get his chance in Wilson, as you said, and they'll see if he can keep building on that. It's a cool story.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you are listening still, I applaud you. We heard last year, all of you told us, take as long as you want, and we listened. This is always going to be, whenever we do this is going to be the longest, because we basically fit 3 teams and all of the recap of the entire offseason to this point in here. So this was always going to be the longest one. We will still go long. I promise you that. It'll be long episodes, but it won't be 3 hours. If it goes 3 hours, I'm not doing another episode after this one. So we will make sure to cover what we got to cover, but we're going to do it in like 2-ish or less, hopefully, but it's going to be 2. But that's what we've got coming up. We will have the low A one probably, considering Christmas is in 2 weeks. It will not be in 2 weeks. But probably sometime between Christmas and New Year, we will have that next one coming out, or we'll fit it in a little bit before, but it's not going to overlap with Christmas. I'm not going to, it would just be terrible timing on our part. So we're not going to do that. But if we don't talk to you before that, hope everyone does have a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, everything else. And I hope you enjoyed listening to 3 hours of us babbling about prospects. Have a good night, everyone.